Hey everyone! Hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to the Anime Fictions 2.0. Today, we're diving into What If Naruto Attracted to Mikasa? Part 2. If you're loving these alternate timelines, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more awesome content. Share it with your friends, enjoy the ride together, and don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I always love hearing your ideas. Alright, enough story. Breach. The hour passed by far too swiftly. I can't believe we did that. Disbelief didn't even come close to explaining how Naruto felt in this moment. Yes, there was shock. But there was also joy. A fierce radiance bubbling up inside him, threatening to explode outwards in a joyous shout at the slightest provocation. He lay there with her, his body no longer slicked with the sweat of their exertions, but warm and dry. Regrets? She whispered, his lips nibbling at his ear. None. He sighed happily. Annie rose her head up from his chest and kissed him before she got up from their impromptu bed of grass and leaves to find her clothes. She even walks around differently than other women, Naruto thought, to himself, recalling the last time he'd been with Mei. She had slid out from the covers with only a smoldering smile and left him behind to change, uncaring if his attention traced across every inch of her body. Annie simply strode around the clearing, bending over to retrieve articles of clothing as she discovered them, slowly gathering up her uniform. She has nothing to be shy about, anyway, he thought as she had bent over to pick up the white underwear he tugged off with his teeth only an hour earlier that evening. She shot a look at him as he watched her, her cheeks dusted with pink, as she put her clothes on, underwear first. There was just something so godman cute about that. That was certainly an interesting hour. Naruto murmured to himself as he pulled up his pants and readjusted his belt, holstering on his gear once more. Hidden away in the shadows afforded both by the trees and the sun, he felt almost at ease, despite his nakedness. All of his earlier anger and frustration were gone, having vanished with the light on the horizon. It was as if he'd had a knot trapped inside his stomach for these last 3 years, a terrible tautness that had refused to leave him alone. Until now, me neither. Kurama's satisfaction was tantamount to joyous weeping. It's been so long since you've been with a woman. And you betted the best FO the bunch. You done this old fox proud. Shut up, will ya? The last sage risked one last glance over his shoulder, and was well rewarded with a glimpse of alabaster skin just before Annie Leonhardt reclaimed her scattered articles of clothing, slipped her shirt back on. It suddenly struck him that she hadn't been wearing a bra the entire time. Well now. That'd be an interesting little fact to remember. Hentai. She scolded as she caught him staring, pausing to cross both arms before her bare bosom. Stop staring at me like that. Hey, Naruto replied, I was just making sure I didn't bruise you anywhere. They'd certainly been rough enough to push their regeneration to its limits, biting and scratching and clawing with everything they had, and more. It must have brought a smile to his face, because her scowl deepened. Hentai. It's not like you weren't looking either, he continued. In fact, your eyes were wandering quite a bit when we HNTI. The forcefulness of her statement prompted him to perform an about-face. He'd no desire to anger her after their wonderful lovemaking. Then, as Annie Leonhardt often did, she surprised him. A slow sigh snaked between his teeth as he felt all the softness of her female form press itself against his still bare back, her arms following suit seconds later. Annie. Who would have thought that despite their differences, this would actually happen? Not him, not at all. Never, even in a million years. The slightest of smiles pulled at his whiskered cheeks at such a thought. You know, I could get used to this. You have a lot of scars. She murmured into his back. Naruto sighed, blue eyes drifting shut in the evening light. He'd known this was coming. Seen it a mile away. Annie simply wasn't the type to keep her mouth shut. If she wanted to say something, then damn it she'd say it. Didn't matter if it hurt your feelings or not. Even now could feel her running her fingertips up and down his back, her crystal-colored eyes tracing every line that were meant to be seen, and some that weren't. Annie was silent for a long time. He could feel her scrutiny boring into his very soul. She was curious, dying to ask him where he'd gotten so many wounds. So? He asked at last. Are you curious? Yes. Naruto said softly to himself and turned in her arms, presenting his body unto hers, nuzzling his head into her neck. There was slightest hitch in her breath as he did so. It was the sweetest sound he'd ever heard. The swell of her bare breasts pushing up against his chest, skin to skin, was enough to send shivers shooting down his spine. Once more, he was stricken by just how small she seemed here, held in his arms. He was heads and shoulders taller than her and certainly much stronger. And yet, for all that she lacked in size, he knew Annie could give anyone a brutal beating if she were so inclined. She was feisty, cold at times, and yet at other, as he'd so recently learned, she could be downright warm. It was just one of the many things he was beginning to love about her. Love. Ah, that was a new one, wasn't it? He'd sealed off his heart since May's death all those years ago, only to have it wrenched open once again by these blasted kids. He was still adjusting to such a concept. He loved all his students in equal measure: Mikasa, Armin, Jean, Mina, Sasha, Krista, Annie herself, and last but not least, though unbeknownst to the others, Marco. He cared for all of them, Naruto told himself, and yet he knew he'd be lying to himself if his female students didn't have a slight edge over the others, just as Annie had momentarily carved for herself the lead spot in his heart. For now, he still wasn't sure how he'd explain to the others what had happened here today. The longer they stayed here, the greater the chance they risked of creating complications. His thoughts soon proved prophetic as Annie touched a hand to his neck, caressing the very spots where Haku's needles had torn into him when he was just a boy. It had been his first true shinobi combat outside the village. Those demon brothers didn't count and he'd nearly died. Now that had been a close one. Naruto spent the next 15 minutes allowing her to examine him, spending undue time he shouldn't have. It was an enlightening experience to say the least. All the while the sun continued to sink lower and lower toward the horizon, and this? At last she traced a faint indentation just below his right pectoral. Well, that's what happens when your best friend shoves a Chidori through your lung and out of your back. Naruto found himself replying. It hurt like a bitch at the time, wa? Just then he noticed her disbelief. Clearly she was wondering how anyone, not just him, could survive such a debilitating wound. Don't make that face. You know how I heal. Yes, but, that's the same technique you taught Mikasa. Yeah. He felt wistful just talking about it. I know she won't misuse it though. She might have Uchiha blood, but she's a good kid. They stared at each a long moment before he finally released her, bending down to retrieve his battered jacket. So am I still a pervert? He purred at her. I hate you. She murmured. I am fully aware of that, Annie, he said, glancing down at himself. To what do I owe the pleasure of your unexpected attention? A smirk stretched across his face, leaving her weak and wanting. She had no idea how much longer she could hold herself from sexually assaulting him again. He kissed her fingers tips one at a time, each brush and passing of his lips leaving her face flushing. She reached up and grabbed at his half-slung jacket, seeking to pull him closer. Re-yip. Both blondes blinked as Naruto's jacket, beaten and battered from their lovemaking, split down the center. Annie started giggling at him. The expression on his face as the shirt ripped had been wonderful. He had looked down in mild surprise, but when he returned his gaze to her, it was a very sheepish look that he wore. I told you that shirt was ruined, she said as she leaned forward and kissed him, hoping that this slight derailment wouldn't affect his desire for her. He laughed and hungrily kissed her back, leaning into her, forcing her to lie back down on the tree. Another 15 minutes died that way. When she was fully dressed, she came over to him and kissed him for a final time. They stood like that for a long instant, cherishing the moment. Byakrang. Naruto reluctantly tore his lips from hers as a black flare roared into the sky. Pixis was waiting for him. Whatever plan he had for restoring troop morale was about to begin. She looked slightly saddened as they neared the wall once more. Well then, I guess this is it, isn't it? You're going to go play hero now, aren't you? I'm the only one who can make sure Eren doesn't go berserk. If you make it back in one piece, she said, her subtle look of sorrow vanishing as she smiled deviously at him. Then perhaps we'll do this again. He started in surprise as she stood up on her tiptoes, her lips pushing against his mouth with a ferocity he hadn't expected. She didn't even give him time to return the kiss. She simply turned and left without another word. Naruto listened to her retreat, observing her departure silently, as her footsteps took his fellow blonde further and further away from him. He sighed and closed his eyes, placing his hands behind his head. The entire hour flashed through his mind again, and he couldn't help but smile as her last words echoed in his mind. Perhaps we'll do this again. Well, he thought, smiling. At least there's that. Pixis was waiting for him as he climbed the wall. So too were his students. None dared wonder where he had been for so long. It wasn't as though the titans below were going anywhere. The only risk that lay in waiting was that more and more of them would doubtlessly come through the gap as time went on. Granted, that risk could be countered by shadow clones, but his students didn't have anywhere as much pull in the technique as he did. He really couldn't expect a counter-offensive from them in that regard. You certainly took your time, the wizened commander noted. Had some business to wrap up, Naruto drawled. Annie scaled the wall seconds later and, for the most part, paid him no attention. Her intentions were betrayed in the slightest glance at him, her eyes softening as they held his. Naruto stubbornly fought the urge to smile back. They'd agreed to arrive separately. It would arouse suspicions if they were seen together. Besides, the last thing they, or anyone, needed right now was dissent in the ranks, and a relationship between student and teacher would do just that. Are you prepared to throw your life away? Hardly. The blonde rolled his shoulders. But if that's what it takes to seal the hole, who am I to judge? Well said. Pixis took a deep breath and exhaled it in the same instant, facing towards the troops gathered below. Then, attention! All at once the susurrus of fearful whispers below fell silent. Even Naruto was amazed at the man's ability to project his voice. I will now elaborate on the plan to recapture Trost District. The objective of this plan is to seal the hole in the destroyed gate. I will now explain how we intend to seal that hole. Belonging to the Survey Corps, this is Uzumaki Naruto. And his student, of the Training Corps, Eren Jiger. They are the product of successful top-secret Titan transformation research. They are each capable of generating a Titan's body and moving it according to their will. In their Titan form, one of them will lift the large boulder in the vicinity of the front gate, carry it to the destroyed gate, and seal it. Your duty is to protect them from other Titans until they've moved that boulder. Carry that large boulder? That's just. Has mankind finally taken control of the Titans? You're lying. Daz screamed. I won't risk my life for a retarded reason like that. What do you think we are? We're not disposable blades, you know. Up on the wall, Naruto twitched. That little shit. Is he still bitching around? I should have killed him when I had the chance. Beside him, Sasha stiffened. Oh crap, Sensei's getting pissed. Still the cries continued to rise, growing steadily louder with each moment, each passing second. Human weapons, he says. That's obviously a lie. Making fools of us. They're telling us to die here today. I'm out of here. Me too. Same here. I've had enough of this. Though the soldiers continued to panic, Pixis stood strong in the face of this adversity. Heed my command, he declared. Those who desert us now will all be pardoned. Once a man surrenders to their fear of Titans, they are no longer fit for battle. Those who've experienced that terrible fear are free to leave. Furthermore, those of you who want your parents, siblings, and loved ones to experience that same fear for themselves may also leave. There was a silence. Slowly but surely, the murmurings of dissent morphed into ones of resolve, and Naruto realized the commander's brilliance. Few, if any, of the soldiers were willing to condemn those they deemed precious to death at the hands of the Titans. Let us think back to 4 years ago. The commander continued. Recall the plan to recapture Wall Maria? Though I presume you all know this without me having to say, the plan itself sounded glorious, but in essence, it was a way to rid ourselves of the unemployed that the government was unable to support. The only reason everyone maintained their silence was because we managed to survive with these confined walls, thanks to their sacrifices. All of mankind bears that sin, including myself. Well, that explains a lot. Naruto experienced a bitter epiphany just then. I was wondering what happened to all those I rescued. And they were sent off to slaughter instead? Such is the way of humanity. Kurama shared in his disgust. In our time, no one would have dared do such a thing. If Pixis recognized the killer internet, he said little otherwise. Because the inhabitants of Wall Maria were few in number, the conflict did not escalate. But what about now? If Wall Rose is breached, reducing the mouths to feed by a fifth won't suffice. Not even a half of the remaining population can be supported within only Wall Sina. Should mankind cease to exist, it would not be because we were all devoured by Titans. We humans would be our own end. We mustn't die within narrower walls. He spread his arms wide, his voice peaking at the last. I implore you, my fellow soldiers, die where you stand today, so that your loved ones may not die tomorrow. Only a few minutes later, Mikasa found Naruto giving them a similar speech. He'd gathered them here atop the wall sometime afterwards. The plan was made, their decision set. They, as Naruto's students, would serve as the vanguard, excepting Armin, who would remain behind due to his tactical prowess. Besides, his frail body wasn't exactly suited to battle. But that wasn't the problem here. Fear. Confusion. Dread. She could see it in the eyes of Jean and the others. They were baffled in more ways than one. Not only that Naruto had secretly taught and trained Marco, gifting him techniques he daren't teach them, but that he'd kept this monstrous ability under wraps all this time. Remarkably, Sasha seemed the least bit fazed by it all. If anything, she seemed relieved. But that didn't make any sense. Only she and Armin had witnessed Naruto's ungodly Titan form, exempting Eren, of course. So why then did the potato girl seem so at ease? Mikasa silently made a note to inquire further. Listen well. Naruto cleared his throat, gaining his students' attention, silencing their murmurs. I know you weren't expecting this. None of you were. You may be surprised by what you have been told here today. You might be shocked by what you have learned. And it's all true. Every last bit of it. His blue eyes took them each in turn, warm and emphatic. That's right. I possess the same power as Eren, the power to transform into a Titan at will. For the last 3 years I have held this power and kept it a secret from each of you. Mikasa and Armin have seen it for themselves and they aren't afraid. But there is another secret I have yet to tell you lot, and, here he did roll his shoulders, I suppose now's as good a time as any. Kurama, if you will? As if on cue, sapphire irises snapped into scarlet. When next he spoke his voice was not his own, but that of another. It was if a coin had been flipped, if Naruto was heads then this other him was certainly tails. She'd not been able to put her finger on it before, but she was almost certain she recognized this other half, this darker persona. It was almost as if she knew him. 3 years to this day, the stranger in Naruto's body began, you witnessed this brat transform into a giant fox. I trust you haven't forgotten? That form was me. The great Kurama. I reside within your precious sensei, and my chakra dwells within 2 of you. His lips pulled back to expose sharp, deadly teeth. It's so nice to finally lay eyes on the rest of you with my own eyes. Do try not to panic and die today, little meatbags. It'd be such a shame if your potential went to waste. Kurama blinked, and just like that, Naruto was back in control. Blue eyes regarded them coolly, waiting for panic to break out. When none did, he sighed. Many things have changed. His voice was a touch softer than she'd ever heard. As I told you yesterday, you are no longer my students. And I am no longer your teacher. But with these revelations, your viewpoint of me has doubtlessly changed even further. Some of you may even think me a monster, but one thing hasn't changed. To me, you are still my precious students. And as such, I still care for each of you. I would gladly lay down my life here at your feet if it meant I could keep you all alive. But I cannot do that. My strength is needed here today. Your strength is needed here today, but if any of you think me a monster, if any of you have succumbed to fear, feel free to walk away at this very moment. I will not stop you. Bullshit. Mina Carolina croaked out, startling her fellow blackette. Her sensei gave her the look, but otherwise didn't comment on this less than delicate response. Apparently that was close enough to how he thought she'd feel when he revealed his less than savory history. Sensei, she continued, stepping to him, why should we be afraid of you? I'm not saying you shout. Naruto replied stoically, staring down at the shorter girl. Only that I won't blame you for your fear, MPH. His words died then and there as her mouth found his, seeking not his cheek this time, but his lips, her tongue caging his for what felt like an eternity. Mikasa bristled at the sight, her mouth forming a small, open O at the sight. That little wench. How dare she do such a thing? She wouldn't stand for it. Almost before she thought to stop herself, she stepped to her sensei and elbowed Mina aside, taking one of his arms for her own. To her dismay, Mina did the exact same thing. You're not allowed to kiss him, she said softly, refusing to falter under the girl's withered glare. And why is that? Mina clutched Naruto tighter. Be because you don't care about him like I do. What? Mina refused to give ground. She held tighter to the baffled blonde and stuck out her tongue. Her resolve didn't waver in the slightest. Ridiculous. Both girls glared at one another, sparks flew betwixt and between them. Out of the corner of her eye Mikasa watched Aram's sweat drop at the odd behavior. Jean's reaction was slightly more outstanding. The boy practically face-bombed. Doubtless, her fellow disciple was less than pleased by this strange, unusual brok of etiquette. Or perhaps he was just jealous? Only Kami knew. Just as Mikasa knew she wasn't about to yield to her rival for Naruto's affections. Their standoff lasted all of an instant longer. Then, to their dual disbelief, Naruto shook himself free. I appreciate your feelings, he began slowly, but now isn't the time for this. We'll discuss it later, assuming we live through today. Mikasa didn't like that. At all. By effectively telling them not to display their feeling in public, he was basically telling them to shut the hell up and get along with one another, as if Mikasa could after what she'd just seen. But Sensei, and Naruto's right. Someone seconded, severing that thought. Now isn't the time for this. Mikasa's eyebrows shot up. Krista? Well now, this was a surprise, Naruto mused to himself. Though everyone seemed surprised and in Annie's case, more than slightly miffed by Mikasa and Mina's display of affection, no one actually spoke out against his command. None admitted that they were afraid to give up their lives today, terrified that they all might die a horrible death before today was through. Each stood fast and strong, refusing to even consider the possibility of their own impending demise. Well, aren't you a lucky bastard? Kurama butted in. You've got most of your female students pining after you and one in the sack already. It's almost a shame that Krista Lass has a thing for Emer, you know. Okay, we are not talking about this. Drawing himself up to his full height, the blonde crossed both arms behind his back. Whatever had stirred in his heart, it was gone now. Ever since the Titans appeared, mankind has not once claimed victory over them. For every inch the Titans advanced, you have retreated in kind, continually giving up territory. However, when this plan succeeds, mankind will recapture territory from the Titans for the first time in history. That moment will mark the first time mankind has triumphed over the Titans. Compared to all that mankind has lost thus far, this may be overwhelmingly insignificant. However, despite that, to mankind, it will be a great advance. I have faith in each of you. Go out there and kick some Titan ass, is what you said, Kurama growled as they traversed the city. But do you have any guarantee that brat won't snap and attack us instead? Naruto was silent for a long moment at that one. The only sound to be heard was that of his maneuver gear carrying them to the boulder. There was only the wind in his hair and the knowledge that no matter what happened here today, people were going to die. He'd already abandoned the notion of saving everyone. He simply wanted to get the breach plugged as swiftly as possible before something happened. Sasha and Mikasa would be accompanying him this far alongside the elite squad, but as even the best generals knew, sometimes the most well-laid plans went awry. In short, he really didn't have an answer for the Fox's inquiry. Nope, so basically, we're winging it. Again. The Kitsune's deadpan was barely concealed, pretty much. A flash of green light to his right signaled the start of Eren's transformation, cutting off whatever his tenant might have said. And that's our cue. As one, the blonde disengaged his maneuver gear and raised a thumb to his mouth. Blood spurted against his tongue as he sank his teeth into the lone digit, his figure engulfed in a lightning bolt of pure power. There was a terrifying sensation of weightlessness, then gravity took hold, sending his body crashing down into a nearby building. He lay there for a moment, making absolutely certain he had control. Then, and only then did he begin to move, his titan form levering itself out of the debris in silence, its breath causing the very earth to tremble. Blazing crimson orbs surveyed all before him, his 6 arms working as one to lever his body out of the evacuated building into which he had fallen. He stood tall and proud, surveying the humans lining the rooftop, searching for any signs that anything was amiss. Finding nothing, he allowed his body to relax. If only minutely. Is he in control? Riko wondered aloud. As though he'd read her mind, the gigantic blonde flashed a single thumbs up with one of his many hands. He turned to face the boulder, waiting for Eren to take the lead. Alright then. Now let's get this over with, huh? Naruto frowned at Eren's titan form. It was behaving strangely. Instead of lifting the boulder as had been the plan, it was just standing there, gazing off into empty space, uncaring even as countless soldiers began to perish around them. Sasha and the others, his precious shinobi students, were out there buying time for Eren to lift the boulder while the task of personally protecting him fell to Naruto's titan form. And all because he himself didn't want any part of the glory. He was beginning to regret that decision. TCH. At this rate he'd have to do it himself. Striding forward, he reached out with one of his 6 arms, seeking to jostle the smaller titan by the shoulder. Jiger. He growled. Get your head out of your ass. We need to move. No response. Naruto shook him again, roughly this time. Eren, that got a response. The titan turned to face him, green eyes narrow. A low growl left his lips, causing the blonde to stiffen. What in the world? Dodge. Perhaps it was his confusion. Or maybe the misguided belief that Eren wouldn't dare attack him for fear of what he'd seen earlier. Regardless, Naruto found himself unprepared as the rogue titan lurched to its feet, eyes little more than slits in the back of its head, hands clenched into fists. Oh, clenched knuckles barreled into his unprotected face. Hard. It all happened so fast, Sasha realized. One moment Naruto and Eren were standing there. The next, Eren attacked her senpai. Even as part of her itch to defend him, her training kicked in, cold reasoning dousing the flames of her anger. Now was not the time for a burning heart. Cooler heads needed to prevail. Titans were closing in. Naruto and Eren couldn't afford to fight now, but she could. Her affinity was Earth. She could easily use the land itself to keep them tied down for a few precious minutes in order to finish them off. But that would require speed. Speed she alone possessed. The only risk that presented was getting awfully close. No. She had to do this. Even if it meant her life would be rendered forfeit. Her heart sank into her stomach at the thought. Steeling herself, she dug deep into the reservoir that was her chakra, then deeper still, reaching for the 8 gates that her mentor had taught her. 3 of them opened almost immediately, her hair standing on end, her skin staining itself the color of blood. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Here goes nothing. Naruto grunted in surprise, staggering back a step, jaw hanging loose from the blow. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Sasha hurtling toward the encroaching titans. Somehow, the sight of his student hurling herself in the face of the enemy galvanized him. Any regrets he might have had at harming Eren vanished in that instant. Fine then, if that brat wanted to lose himself in that titan body of his, so you wanna play, huh? Eren's response was to roar and lunge, slavering maw split wide for the kill. His senpai didn't even bother to backpedal or block. Instead, he struck upward with all six arms, driving massive fists into the smaller titan's torso with all the force of an explosive typhoon. They struck the earth together as one, grappling and growling and grabbing at one another, each seeking the upper hand when none seemed to be found. But while Eren's smaller body afforded him a smaller target, Naruto was a good 5 meters larger, stronger, and with arms to spare. Naruto didn't know whether Eren was remotely sane enough to realize his mistake, but he was about to pay for it dearly. 2 arms locked around the smaller titan's shoulders, in a vicious vice, and pulled, preventing him from utilizing his superhuman strength ever again. Forgive me, Eren. This was Naruto's last thought before he ripped the titan's arms off with his almighty strength, severing them at the shoulders. Eren screamed, roaring in pain as steam spouted from the stumps that had once been his arms, screamed as Naruto thrust him down to the ground, fists met face all at once, all 6 of his arms working as one single entity, striking and striking and striking, pounding down with relentless force. You stupid buffoon, he ground out between each blow. I don't have time for this. Come to your senses. Back to yourself. Didn't you want to go outside? To see the world, beyond these walls and the ocean? Snap the fuck out of it. His fist struck down for a final time, smashing the titan flash in the face. Still no response. Had Eren lost himself to the titan for good? In any case, he didn't have time to sit and wait around for him to awake. Growling, Naruto strode to the boulder, his 6 arms flexing in anticipation as he approached the gigantic rock. He only hoped Mikasa would forgive him for abandoning her foster brother. Naruto's approaching the boulder. Dimly, as though from a great distance, he could hear Ian barking out orders. Defend him at all costs. Grunting, the blonde took himself to task and wrapped all 6 of his arms into the gigantic rock. With a supreme efforts, he began to pull. Heavy. That was his first thought when his arms closed around it. Even with his titanic strength, it took him more than several seconds to muster the power needed just to lift it off the ground, let alone over his head and into the air. But in time he succeeded, hoisting it high with some strain. There was just one problem. Ian and the others were doing their job, but there were far more titans than there should be. More than they, or their limited numbers, could hope to handle alone. To the east, he could see Sasha struggling to hold off another wave of titans. Her chakra usage was spiking faster than her kill count, it seemed. Was it because of Kurama's chakra, he wondered? Now that he had to tend to the task of moving the boulder himself, now that he'd finally gotten the damn thing off the ground and onto his back, how the hell was he supposed to get it to the gate, in one piece? With his greater size and strength, he'd originally been meant to protect Eren, utilizing his control to keep the titans off him. Now, forced to attend the task alone, he realized sacrificing himself might very well become an all-too-real option. Even now he could see the titans lumbering towards him, alerted by his massive form just standing there, holding the boulder. This couldn't possibly end well. If he had to stop and defend himself in each instance, they'd never get this hole closed. Behind him, something stirred in his peripherals. Naruto could only pray that it was Eren. Have you come to your senses yet? A low, warbling growl greeted him as something grabbed him from behind. Nope. Definitely not Eren. Siniva. Teeth clamped down on the aberrant's neck, crushing vertebrae in an instant. The rogue titan swung the body down with gusto, tearing it to pieces with the sheer momentum of its throw. Seemingly satisfied with this kill, it dropped the now smoldering corpse to the ground. Eren stared at him for a long moment, then he lurched to his feet. His arms returned in an instant, flesh and muscle sprouting over bone. He took one look at them, glanced at Naruto, then back to the titans. Something seemed to resolve itself in those green eyes. He watched the boy become titan, raise a hand and thump it once against his chest. As if that weren't enough, he opened his mouth and gave a might-sounding Ruahayawarg. Naruto grunted. I'll take that as a yes. With fire in his face and Eren at his back, he strode forward into the jaws of death. He could only pray for the safety of his students now. Their fate was no longer in his hands but their own. Son of a bitch. Jean Kirchstein was cursing that very fate as he barreled down the streets of Trost, trying and failing to outrun the swarm of titans he'd attracted. They were gaining on him, slow but steady. Damn maneuver gear. Of all the times to malfunction, it had broken at the worst possible time. Now what would he do? He was barely outrunning them as things stood, but if this kept up. In the end, inspiration came from the most unlikely of sources. A torch flickered in his peripherals as he ran. Against all odds, someone had forgotten to put it out before they fled. Jean had never considered the practical applications for fire before joining the military. Upon becoming a shinobi, he thought even less of such things. For the last 3 years he trained relentlessly from dawn to dusk, and it was only in the last month of his training that Naruto ever mentioned affinities. Sasha had taken to earth. Annie air. Mikasa lingered in lightning. Mina was like a fish in, well, water. And Krista, their sweet, gentle little Krista, had two affinities, water and earth. Armin had none, though he appeared to be well-rounded in each category. Marco's main proficiency, when the hell did Naruto have time to train him, was that of Sannin techniques, making up for his lack of jutsu. But what did Jin have? Fire. According to Naruto, he had a natural talent bordering on that of an Uchihas. He'd had the smallest amount of chakra from the beginning, but Naruto had worked with him, helped him to raise that meager reserve of all but lackluster into something magnificent. He taught him one of the most powerful jutsu he'd even witnessed, a great fire cataclysm that could wipe out an entire army, an entire city if used incorrectly. Just one usage depleted a fourth of his own reserves. For Jin to use such a technique, it all but exhausted nearly all his chakra. But what choice did he have? His maneuver gear wasn't working properly, and if those titans got a hold of him, it was game over. Steeling himself, he drew in a deep breath, kneading the chakra in his stomach, giving it shape and form. Goka Mekakyu. He exhaled mightily, expelling all the chakra he'd been stoking in his lungs. The great fireball that burst forth from his lips was no fireball at all. It was a rising, focused inferno that swept forward in a straight line, roiling forward into the titans. The great Goliaths had just enough time to realize their folly before the blaze overtook their position, swallowing them whole. But it didn't stop there. Jin balked, baffled, as the hot blaze kept going, sweeping onward in a fierce arc, incinerating a score of nearby buildings, charring them to ash alongside the titans he'd attacked. Oh shit. His mind railed against this sudden turnabout, instinctively fought the realization that he might have killed someone just now, reminding itself that everyone had already been evacuated. Jin seriously hoped that was the case. He didn't think he'd be able to bear such a catastrophic loss of life. Still, it was then, as the titans collapsed in a smoldering heap, that Jin realized something. Fire was a handy tool to have. Swirya. Water Dragon. Mina Carolina shouted with all her might and drew upon her chakra, willing the moisture to resonate in the air around her body, taking the shape she so desired. That of a dragon. Its great bulk towered over her and all she'd come to protect, leering down at the titans lining the street. When it had at last grown large enough, she willed the beast forward, its body flooding the streets, its teeth making short work of necks and heads alike in swift succession below. Armin, she called. Do it. Now. Right. Her fellow student rushed past, a wedge of kunai in each hand. He leapt and let them fly, each knife armed with an explosive tag. They sank straight and true, landing just below the neck of each titan. The blonde landed beside her, and raised his hand into a sign. Katsu. An explosion rocked the streets below, effectively finishing off the wretched lives of the titans. It's a shame Krista couldn't join us, he mused to himself. Would have made things easier. Mizurapa. His head snapped around just in time to witness the black cat forcefully expel a gout of water from her lips, blasting a climbing aberrant off its perch to join the others in the flood down below. Mina wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. No, it's nothing. She stood in the worst disadvantage here. With no water to draw upon and manipulate, she was forced to create it entirely with her own reserves. It was exhausting work, but for every life she saved, she felt as though she'd done a world of good. For each survivor meant another loved one would return safely to their families. Loved one. Her cheeks flushed at the thought, an image of Naruto emerging in her mind. I can't believe I kissed him back there. Just the thought of it made her squirm. She'd actually cursed at him, and then kissed him. There was no way someone as powerful, wonderful, and so incredibly kind as Naruto could ever possibly return her feelings. But still, it was well worth it. If she could bring herself to do such a thing in public, then there might be a chance for her yet. Mina. The blackhead blinked, drawn from her swooning by Armin's voice. Armin pointed to the still-soaked streets. I think you overdid it a little. Oops. She sweat dropped at the small flooded she'd created. I really hope that evaporates before Sensei sees. Disappear. Annie flicked her fingers and an invisible wind erupted from her palms, slamming into each titan nearest her, eviscerating their necks to bloody shreds. 3 more titans perished before her unseen assaults, their lives snatched before they'd even knew what had killed them. Beside her 2 more toppled as Marco blurred past them, ending their lives crushing cuts to the neck. So that was the power of his senjutsu then. She'd known that Sage Mode gave an individual unbelievable strength, skill, and speed, but this was ridiculous. Being the elite of Naruto's pupils, the pair had an entire sector to themselves. Annie was almost grateful for that. It meant she didn't have to deal with the precocious elites, and seeing as she barely knew Marco, she did not have a reason to be particularly aggressive towards him. Until now. No. Annie-san? Yeah? Aren't you overdoing things a little? Whatever it was, it inflamed her fury to an almost righteous degree. It was only then that she saw his eyes, that she realized Marco was still using Sage Mode. Strange. Why was Marco still using? It's strange, he murmured, peering intently at her. I can sense titans when I'm like this. And for a second there, you. No. He shook his head, suddenly sheepish. I'm still new at this. I must have made a mistake, or something. What? Annie pressed, feeling a snake of dread slither into her gut. A snake of losing everything she'd ever known, everything she'd just gained. What were you talking about? For a second there, you had the same aura as a titan. Annie froze. Oh no. No. He was going to screw everything up. Just when she'd finally thought herself to have found a bit of solace. It had to be taken away. In that instant his mind shut down, presenting her with two possibilities. Kill or be killed. If there was any chance that Marco was suspicious, if he acted on those suspicions and told someone, everything would be ruined. She was suddenly conscious of the blade in her hand. Its weight, the weight of what she now had to do, seemed impossibly heavy. She couldn't risk it, couldn't trust him as she trusted Naruto. He wasn't reliable, trustworthy, or anything like his mentor. She panicked. He'd tell everyone. Then she'd have no choice but to run or be killed, both by her own people and those within the walls. She would never be safe again, all because of him. Because of she'd made a stupid decision and slipped up. But there was a way out of this, she realized. If Marco never told anyone. Marco, hi, what's that over there? She pointed in a random direction, silently hoping he'd fall for her trick. He did. I don't see anything. Biting back tears, Annie waited until she was certain his back was completely turned. Then she raised her sword high and cut down at his body. The entire world was a blur to Mikasa Ackerman. At the outset of Naruto and Eren's conflict, she'd wanted nothing more to step in. But she just couldn't. Couldn't bring herself to choose between the boy that had saved her as a child, and the man who had taught her everything she knew, just and all. And so she'd flung herself away, tears in her eyes, emotions tearing at her heart as she continued to fend off the titans until Naruto finally got Eren under control. That had been 5 minutes ago. Maybe longer. Mikasa no longer knew. What she did know was thus, for some reason, she was in perfect form on a sudden. Indeed, the world was a blur. Every titan she encountered seemed to be moving in slow motion, their movements stiff and sluggish in comparison to her own. Sometimes, she even managed to predict what they would do before they did it. Her kill count continued to skyrocket, before she finally found the cause of her sudden increase in ability. Until this moment she'd assumed it to be her anger at Mina, aggression driving her to try harder and harder to prove herself in the eyes of her sensei. Now she knew otherwise. She caught sight of herself in a nearby window then, and her heart nearly stopped. Why were her eyes red? Wait, that wasn't right. They were indeed red, but she could see a tomo within each of them, a single black comma mark standing out against her scarlet irises. A prickle of very real fear touched at her heart. What's happening to me? So you've finally activated your Sharingan, Kurama's voice rebounded through her head. Interesting. What? You needn't shout. The fox yawned. Some of my chakra dwells within you and browse. It's only natural I'd want to keep tabs on my investments. Speaking of which, you may want to take a look over yonder. Mikasa's gaze snapped back toward the breach. Sure enough, she could see something moving in its direction. Titans. 2 of them. But that could only mean Naruto. She couldn't help it. Her eyes began to mist over as she saw him carrying the boulder, a veritable atlas bearing all the weight of the world on his shoulders. But that didn't make any sense. Eren was supposed to have been the one to carry the boulder, not the blonde. Had something happened? Even so, they were nearly to the gate. Eren just had to protect him for a few more seconds. Oigaki, Mikasa started as the sound of someone's maneuver gear dragged her from her reverie. A figure alighted effortlessly upon the rooftop beside her, his coat bearing the wings of freedom upon his back. He stared back at her for a long moment, dark eyes narrowing at the sight of her still crimson orbs. Belatedly, Mikasa realized that the scouting legion had finally arrived. What's the situation here? Levi demanded to know. Numbed, Mikasa could only point down toward the breach in the same instant that Naruto's titan body broke into a run. It was as though he'd finally realized that the goal stood within sight. Only a few precious yards of open, titan-free space separated him from the gate now that the titans had been drawn to Eren. Despite herself, the Blackette felt just a touch afraid as she uttered a single, solitary word. There was something about it, that glint in her eyes, which left her undoubtedly at ease. That. Levi followed her arm, eyes widening slightly as he recognized the 6-armed titan bolting for the breach, boulder raised firmly in his many hands. Oh, isn't that aura? With a mighty roar and an equally lengthy heave, Naruto slammed the massive rock down against the gate with a resounding thud. Cracks burst against the wall, rising from the sudden impact as the boulder barred the hole, forever barring the titans that sought to climb inside. Naruto stood there for a long moment, hunched down in his final exertion. Then he stood. A low, throaty growl fled from his jaws. All the titans in the area held his gaze, unknowing of the terror that had been freed to feed upon them. They were far too focused on Eren Jaeger. That, then, was their first mistake. Also their last. Now then, time for the second course. A/N, and there we have it, folks. A lot's happened in this chapter. As we bring the defense of Trost to a close, Naruto solidified his tenuous bond with Annie, knocked some much-needed sense into Eren, and suffering his first significant casualty on the loss of one of his most precious students. Betcha thought it was going to be Jean or Sasha, Nope. Never meant to place either of them into harm's way. But the question remains, what will be the repercussions for Annie attacking Marco? Last but not least, it seems Mikasa and the others have finally gotten wind of just what happened between the two blondes. This can't possibly end well. What will happen? Who will live? Who will die? Will Naruto survive their righteous female fury? Find out next time on I'm Only Human, So. In the immortal words of Atlas, review. Would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Oh well. Sasha whimpered in Naruto's arms as he carried her back to base. Don't move so fast, sensei. I'm sore. That's what you get for releasing 3 gates. The blonde chided his disciple, refusing to slacken his pace in the slightest. Still, the brunette flushed quietly. It's kinda nice, being carried like a princess. What was that? And nothing. Naruto would have said more had he not caught sight of Annie at that very moment. So you survived. He smiled. I found someone. Was all she would say. Without another word, she stepped aside. Naruto felt his heart drop into his throat, plummet into his stomach at the sight of the broken, bloated, eviscerated body laying in a heap behind her. The Aoi seemed to shrink around him as he recognized those black eyes and hair, the coat he'd given him upon graduation. Marco was dead, reconstruct, reckless, Itai. Naruto hissed as Petra swatted him on the back of the head with a roll of gauze. He there, you shouldn't hit a hero. The blow didn't so much hurt as it did humble, reminding him once more of his reckless behavior and bolting back to the walls ahead of his squad. Owen and Levi had done little to reprimand him for his actions, but Petra had been giving him hell the moment she'd finished tending to his wounds. It certainly didn't help that he momentarily maxed out his regeneration the night before. He had a nasty burn on the side of his cheek. To prove it, the injury would likely disappear once his chakra built back up, but until then he was as mortal as the rest of them, unwilling to call upon Kurama's chakra to mend something so minor. And to think I once called you a pussy. His old friend huffed. Hey, I sealed the breach, didn't I? He grumbled as much to the fox as he did Petra, wincing when the woman applied anesthetic to the wound. Ow. Can't you be a little more gentle? I take it back. I can't believe you did that. Disbelief didn't even come close to explaining how Petra felt in this moment. What if something happened to you? Yes, there was shock. But there was also joy. A fierce pride bubbling up inside her, threatening to explode outwards in a joyous shout at the slightest provocation. She'd been right about him, after all. Naruto really did value the lives of his comrades above his own. He was proud of the fact, those bright blues shimmered with it even now. There would be no apologies for his suicidal actions. At least, not today. After all, the wall was sealed, now the reconstruction could begin. I have no idea what you're talking about, Al. Another gentle sweat. You're incredibly reckless, you know that? Would you have it any other way, babe? Naruto grinned. As I recall, you rather enjoyed me being reckless a couple of weeks ago, Baka. She sputtered, a furious blush adorning her cheeks. We're in public, and your point is, Petra flushed, her hands fumbling at the bandage she was applying to his cheek. It was so easy to forget that Naruto's mouth didn't have a filter. He said whatever he wanted whenever he wanted, consequences damned despite that. Probably why the monarchy wasn't so fond of him. Yes, they'd allowed him into the walls all those years ago, and yes, they'd made no move to throw him out since. But more and more she was beginning to fear that there was some sort of plot against him, her brash blonde. He had made himself many enemies within this city, many men who knew how to hold grudges. How long would it be before someone moved against him, she wondered. A human with otherworldly abilities, capable of transforming into a titan at will. Winning the hearts and minds of the people no less. There was no way the king would tolerate something like this over long. It was simply human nature to control what they couldn't understand and destroy that which would not be controlled. It certainly didn't help that Naruto had torn the military police a new one when they tried to have poor Eren executed this morning. The crater in the courtroom certainly attested to his temper. Have you even considered just how much power I possess? I could kill you all with a flick of my little finger. And you wouldn't be able to do a damn thing. That was all he'd said, but it had been enough to get the boy assigned to the Survey Corps. He seemed intent to make all the nobility his enemy, no matter the cost. Or was that really his intention at all? Petra didn't know. And that worried. This balance of power in the walls was rapidly shifting in favor of Naruto and his students with each passing day. Clerics like Pastor Nick and other important figures finding themselves a thing of the past as the common folk began to worship the shinobi he was creating in this new age, revering their new pretexts as gods given human form. A brave new world, clashing against the corruption of the old. Something was going to give soon. But what? She didn't know. Just thinking about that expression was enough to make her shiver. And she wasn't sure if it was a pleasant one. Hey boss, Petra glanced up, that thought falling away from her as another Naruto dropped down from a nearby rooftop, this one easily distinguishable by its soot-soaked body. Indeed, the clone looked as though it had been rummaging around in the ruins, but any such thought perished the moment she saw who the doppelganger was carrying. Clutched in those worn arms, currently clinging to him for dear life was a little girl, her flaxen hair wreathed in dust and debris. She could not have looked a more sorry sight if she tried. Brown eyes peered back at them, hesitant and fearful. Found a survivor. It beamed. Petra gawped. By the walls, she'd never get used to the idea of more than one Naruto. The idea that he could clone himself was one thing, but to see so many of him, nearly a dozen or more, flitting about the city like flies, tasked with keeping peace and order, rescuing civilians trapped beneath the rubble, clearing out Titan corpses, and tending to the wounded, it still shocked her to realize how abominably powerful the blonde truly was. Why he held himself to the Survey Corps, she'd never know. Good work. Naruto didn't even bother to look up as the Kage Bunshin presented her to him. Poor thing looked scared out of her wits. Probably still was, considering the clone had just dug her out of a collapsed house. She'd need more than a warm meal and a hot bath to wash away today's trauma. Hello there. He put on his most winning smile. What's your name, Ayana? She squeaked softly. How old are you? 10. Where are your parents? Eaton. Behind him, Petra cringed. There was a silence. Do you have any relatives to take care of you? He pressed on, ignoring the ache in his gut. A quiet shake of the head confirmed his suspicions. HR mem. I'll look after you until we can find you a home then. Naruto finally looked up, directing his sapphiric gaze at his still-present clone. Alrighty you, take her back to my place and get her cleaned up. Then feed her. Make certain she gets some sleep. Put her under a genjutsu if you have to. I want no expense spared, do you understand? The doppelganger snapped off a smart salute. Yes sir. Are you alright with this? He asked little Anna. The slowest of nods was her only answer. A quick application of healing chakra and she was on her way. I can't believe you just did that. Petra's gaze snapped toward him, unable to convey her disbelief. Did what? She raised the roll of gauze menacingly. What? The blonde shrugged, uncaring for her gawp. Orphanages are evil. I got tossed out of mine when I was only 5 years old. 5, I tell you. You think I'm gonna send her someplace like that? Alrighty, maybe he was a little biased when it came to the idea of an orphanage, but there had been extenuating circumstances. For all he knew, they were just as bad in this age as they were in his. He wasn't about to entrust the poor girl to a system like that. And besides, it wasn't as though he couldn't look after her with his clones. You're really good with kids, aren't you? Petra smiled. Just taking her in like that. Well, you did say you always wanted a daughter. Bop. Naruto. Fine, fine. I'll be serious. The eternal shinobi sighed softly, standing. I guess I just can't stand to see her left alone. She reminds me of myself when I was her age, you know? Truth be told, he never really thought about it like that until now. People needed help, and so he helped. Never once had he considered that most of those people were children, nor the fact that he was simply an able hand when it came to raising kids. Who was he to turn them away? Speaking of which, I think it's time for me to get going. Lots of work to do. Before Petra could reply, he was gone in a yellow flash, sending black spots speckling before her vision. She didn't even bother to chase after him. If the blonde had used her ration just now, he was probably on the other side of the city. Honestly, he just didn't seem to be able to sit still for more than an instant, probably why she fell for him in the first place. Naruto was always moving, always striving, and always helping, never asking for anything in return. He was the very definition of selfless, and she wouldn't have it any other way, always on the move. Oh well. Sasha whimpered in Naruto's arms as he carried her back to base. Don't move so fast, sensei. I'm sure, that's what you get for releasing 3 gates. The blonde chided his disciple, refusing to slacken his pace in the slightest. Your body's not sturdy enough to handle the backlash yet. He'd happened upon her limping a ways back to the barracks, and in typical Naruto fashion, had taken charge of the situation. But with so little of his and Kurama's chakra remained and still more expended by traversing half the city via Horatian master and student were forced to do things the old-fashioned way. They walked. Still, the brunette flushed quietly. It's kinda nice, being carried like a princess. What was that? Naruto blinked, and nothing. The low gurgle of her stomach reminded him of Sasha's plight once more. Yup, definitely an Akimichi, this one. More and more he was convinced that this girl was a long-lost descendant of Chuji. The bottomless pit that was her stomach certainly seemed to attest to that. Didn't mean she hadn't surprised him, though. You almost died, and you're hungry? His deadpan was barely concealed. Sensei. She whined, squirming. It's not my fault. I used up a lot of energy and I'm hurt. I can barely move. Want me to kiss it better? Why you wouldn't dare. Sasha suddenly looked very uncomfortable with that. The light peck he delivered served only to dust her cheeks a pretty pink. Guess I'll have to spoon feed you then, Naruto remarked, drawing his lips away. Unsurprisingly, that drew a smile from her. I'd actually like that. My, she's a bold one. Naruto would have said more had he not caught sight of Annie at that very moment. He saw her alighted upon a nearby roof, seemingly staring off into space. Her eyes had a vacant glint to them that instantly set him on edge all over again. Something had happened. He didn't know what, but whatever it was, it had clearly rattled the shifter to her very core. With a single leap, his legs straining at the movement, he reached her side, an uncomfortable pall hanging over them. So you survived. He smiled, straining. I found someone, was all she would say. Without another word, she turned, pointing down the alley. There, huddled by a broken wall. A body. Or what was left of one. It looked as though a giant fist had crushed their very being to a pulp mass. Poor bastard. But who was he? Setting Sasha down, he jumped back into the alley, eyes straining in the gloom. What are you? Naruto felt his heart jump into his throat, then plummet into his stomach at the sight of the broken, bloated, eviscerated body laying in a heap behind Annie. The always seemed to shrink around him as he recognized those black eyes and hair, the coat he'd given him upon graduation. Marco. Oh no. No. This wasn't happening, couldn't be happening. The sight of him was like a mighty sucker punch knocking the breath out of him in a mighty whoosh, shattering his smile into glassy shards of misery. Marco. His student. His beloved disciple, was dead. Whomever ended him was going to pay. His eyes cut to Annie, burning with the fury of 1,000 suns. Who? He demanded. I didn't see who did it. There was no emotion in her voice. Even with sage mode he sensed nothing from her. It was as if she'd simply ceased to be in his mind's eye. He could see her now as she jumped down to land in a crouch beside him, but her emotions were simply gone. She'd switched herself off to cope for the time being, and nothing could change that. Sasha was worse. Somehow she managed to stumble down the roof after Annie in spite of her aching muscles. Where Annie was numb, the brunette was raw. She was a maelstrom of emotion, one that mirrored his own. Anger. Sorrow. Confusion. Loss. Seeing those emotions locked within her only hurt all the more. Sensei, she whispered, I'm so sorry. With those words, his fury sputtered and died, snuffed out by grief. Sorrow was not an alien emotion for Uzumaki Naruto, but the harsh tears stinging at his eyes most certainly were. He couldn't recall the last time he'd cried. It felt like an age now. He sank to his knees, gasping, bereft, and in the arms of his students did the only thing he could think to do, something he hadn't done in a very long time. He wept. A/N, and there we have it, folks. We see that the monarchy isn't as accepting of Naruto as we first assumed. He's got a small cult revolving around him and his girls Petra included, and then to top off what seemed like a positive day, he finally realizes he's suffered his first significant casualty on the loss of one of his most precious students. Betcha thought it was going to be Jean or Sasha, Nope. Never meant to place either of them into harm's way. But the question remains, what will be the repercussions for Annie attacking Marco? Did she even do it? Did the blade ever connect? Or did someone else have a hand in this dastardly deed? The plot thickens. This can't possibly end well. What will happen? Who will live? Who will die? Will Naruto survive their righteous female fury? Find out next time on I'm Only Human, So. In the immortal words of Atlas, review. Would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Preview, well damn. Naruto whistled softly, eyeing the rifles pointed at his chest, fingers cocked and ready on the triggers. If I'd known you fuckers were going to try something like this, I would have brought snacks. His words sent a ripple of fear shooting through the assembled brigade. So? To what do I owe this welcome? Uzumaki Naruto, Nile swallowed. I'm sorry about this, but by order of His Majesty, you need to come with us. We've already taken your students into custody. Do you think me a fool? The blonde cocked his head aside, scowling. I know for a fact that none of my kids would be captured by you. I trained them better than that. Come now, man, if you're going to bluff, you ought to at least make it a good one. That doesn't change the fact that you'll be coming with us. No, came the reply, his cross-shaped irises regarding them coldly. I don't think I'll be going anywhere with you. Why, you've got nothing now. One of them men, a male, laughed at what he thought to be folly. Nothing but your bloody knives and your fancy karate gimmicks. We have guns. Whatever offense diatribe the man had been preparing ended when the business's end of a flung kunai struck his forehead. His eyes rolled back, words trailing off into a strangled gurgle as he collapsed. Dead before he even hit the ground, Naruto chortled. It was a deep, throaty chuckle as everyone drew back from him. No, he goaded quietly. What you have are bullets and the hope that when your guns are empty, I'll no longer be standing, because if I am, a knife flicked into his hand, you'll all be dead before you've reloaded. Reconcile. Sorrow. It seemed to pervade his every waking, living moment after that horrid afternoon, rendering Uzumaki Naruto little more than a shambling corpse. He ate nothing. Did nothing. Spoke to almost no one, beyond those of his inner circle. He barely slept, and when he did, his dreams were fitful and filled with torment. Nearly a week passed with him in his sorry state. But what Petra found odd was that despite his violent disassociation from nearly every other human being in the walls, he would always, without fail, venture outside of them each morning. Sometimes Levi accompanied him, sometimes he didn't. Regardless of the odd fact, Petra began to notice a pattern amidst the seemingly random acts of departure. Each evening, regardless of whether Levi had accompanied him earlier or not, Naruto would return, covered in titan, blood, and in the blackest of moods. He'd always shut himself away in his quarters afterward, yet emerged without fail the next day. According to the report, a lone member of the military police who'd actually dared question him on these seemingly illicit times and departures ended up torn into so many different pieces the proper authorities never properly identified him. When the Crown tried to take action against him for this seemingly unprovoked act, he killed those enforcers too. Poor sods. Petra shook her head at that thought, shuddering at the memory of his apocalyptic temper. Still, he should have known better. She shifted through report after report given her by Hang. Skimming at first, then reading, eventually frowning as Naruto began taking these excursions more and more often, alone. This strange ritual of his began the day after Marco's corpse was returned to the earth, and to this day, even with Aaron's trial fast approaching in morn, it still hadn't stopped. If anything, it was growing worse. Something had to be done. But by whom? Mikasa and his other students seemed strangely reluctant to interfere. Indeed, they seemed to be too absorbed by their own mourning, closing ranks whenever she tried to approach. Petra respected their silence, but unfortunately it did little to help her. Soon, they'd choose which military branch to enter, and by the walls, they needed those kids in the scouting corps. Naruto's students were skilled to the least. Even meek little Krista had a terrifying affinity for earth capable of creating violent quakes that'd knock you on your ass, or open deep sinkholes capable of sucking a titan down to its doom. It was only natural that the garrison and police would want them. Even the Crown itself seemed interested. But that was a matter painstaking as it was for another time. Today, Petra decided, what truly mattered was tracking Naruto down and snapping him out of this funk. He'd be needed at the trial. Testimony like his would either make or break their plans to retake the walls. So today, the day before Eren was to be released from his cell and judged, she tailed Uzumaki Naruto. Followed him out past the walls. Into the woods, and everything changed. Naruto managed to keep himself under control until he reached the walls. It hadn't been a good day. He hadn't found so much as a single titan to vent himself on. The creatures seemed to be avoiding him now so long as he remained in human form, their primitive minds knowing enough that they were no match for him. That, or he'd simply killed too many. Each day he had to range further and further than before to find new victims. Culling the titans was good for the world, and equally culling his temper if only just. He found solace in slaughter, the mindless monotony of butchering the creatures responsible for taking his student from him. When he tore into those creatures, for the briefest moments, he felt like he was avenging Marco's death. It was a silly thing, but it made him feel better. But today, there had been nothing for him to exhaust himself on. The anger was still there, frothing, seething in the cauldron of his heart, the tiniest provocation promising to send it bubbling over. With every fiber of his being he fought to rein it in as he stormed back to the walls, save it for the beasts he'd failed to encounter today, for the titans. Odds against odds, he actually encountered a group at the wall. Naruto hastened his pace when he saw them at the wall, his body breaking into a brisk trot the moment he sighted upon 1, 2, 3 of the great Goliaths pawing at the boulder barring the gate. One was only 7 meters tall and the other 8, but it was the 15-meter class to which he homed in on. With their backs turned and jaws scratching at the wall, they never saw him approaching. And by then, it was already too late. Had he bothered to use his maneuver gear, he could have taken them all in a single sweep. He did not use the gear. Ting! His blades flew from their sheaths with a murderous rasp, coated in wind chakra. He bellowed a challenge as he stalked forward, finally alerting the beasts to his presence, and they died. Naruto leapt on them with a snarl, tore into them mercilessly, whirling, twirling, spinning, always hacking, always slashing, uncaring for what he hit, dismembered. He never stopped moving even for a moment, inflicting grievous injuries that would have ended most beasts, but not Titans. He was free to bully the creatures to his heart's content, kick their legs out from underneath them and gouge out their eyes, lop off their hands one by one and slice at their fingers. Going for their neck would have been the wisest and safest option, but without anyone to guard, he was free to butcher to his heart's content. So butcher he did. The 7-meter Titan grabbed at him, succeeding in snaring his scouting hood with fumbling fingers. He shrugged out of the garment and slashed both cloak and creature in half, accidentally killing the beast spot on in a single, vertical slash. Gore spurted across him as the beast's bifurcated body tumbled to the ground, but he barely noticed, because he was already moving. Next came the 8. It was slightly larger than in its dead cowsing, but no more intelligent. A single raisin shuriken ripped it from its feet and blasted the beast into the ground. When it tried to rise, he simply summoned another one and obliterated it entirely, cratering the earth beneath his feet with its passing. He leapt nimbly away before the last of its corpse had even cooled, spinning back to face his final foe. At last he was left with the 15-meter. It looked at him strangely, this one, not charging in as its brethren had done. It did not attack, rather, it waited. Naruto frowned, readying himself. An abnormal? What in the world was it waiting for? The world slid sideways. Naruto was on his back, crashing along the stony ground with no control over his own body. He jolted to a stop, disoriented, his ears ringing. His head felt as although it had been stuffed with cotton, fuzzy and faint. Someone, Kurama, was shouting something, and he could not make out the words enough to respond, but he knew the intent. They were coming. Everything was very slow. The air was thick and pressed him to the ground. Gritting his teeth, he squinted up at the creature looming over him. It was large, and it was not human. And it had come from the ground at his feet, he realized, bristling as the Titan pulled the rest of itself from the damp, rain-soaked earth. Its maw was coming down. Sage mode. Naruto drew in the vibrant energies of life and nature in the same instant, remaining unmoving as the beast bit down on his head and shoulder. It had thought it had found itself any easy meal. Imagine the Birdo beast's surprise, therefore, when its incisors and molars shattered like so much glass. Crying out, the stupefied creature lurched backwards, clawing at its now toothless maw. Naruto gave it a pitying glance. Then that pity was nothing more than anger boiling in his veins. Oh, he ground out, raising his viridian gaze to look the stupefied ambusher in the eye. I'm no rookie like Marco. You'll need more than teeth to hurt me. Now it's my turn. His pride was wounded more than anything else. The ambush had served as a reminder that, for all his power, he could still be surprised. Time to finish it then. He broke free and rolled toward the side, hacking at the creature's wrists. It stumbled, but made no sound, as if pain were a thing unknown to it. Naruto flared saffron when it tried to grab him with its maimed arms, instinctively activating his chakra cloak and striking upright with a jarring kick in the same instant. Then he swung at it with all the might possessed by his human body, grunting with effort. The thing turned to him in mid-strike, eyes a-bulging as the kick ripped it out of the earth and launched it backwards. Another ground its face and neck to a fine paste and sent what remained tumbling to join the others. Gra-ah! That was when Naruto noticed the first abnormal bearing down on him with startling speed. Evidently the creature must have recognized the failure of its comrade, because now it spared no expense in attacking him. Too little, too late. This time, he had enough sense to activate his gear. The line shot out, effortlessly anchoring itself into the nearby wall. Thus moored, he leapt forwards, a spurt of gas from the cylinder hurling him into the waiting grasp of his enemy, into its reach. And reach for him it did. Giant fingers blotted out the fading light of the afternoon sun, eking out the last rays of its brilliance, and casting himself into shadow. Naruto might have found it oddly poetic, if it weren't trying to crush him. Then he spun, scissoring his swords outward and cutting himself free. Bloody fingers flew in either direction. Its hand joined it moments later. Great breakthrough. He snarled, summoning up a gust of wind chakra. It all but flattened the towering Titan, slamming it down to the wall. Somehow, it managed to right itself, raising its head to leer blankly at him, mouth agape. Naruto plunged into its gaping maw moments later, and cut his way through in a flash of steel and wind. Exploding out the back of its throat, still steaming with gore, he whirled and cut down into what remained of the creature's neck, striking at that vital point, hard. There was a clang, a spurt of blood, and it toppled to the ground, dead in the earth. Slumping to the ground, he landed, the sound of his descent overshadowed by the earth-shaking crash of the Titan's corpse. Then, and only then did he finally allow himself to breathe. Sweat, blessed air flooded himself and his lungs, relief cooling him as he sucked in an untainted breath, one devoid of the tainted Titan blood that had so espoused the walls. But his heart aimed to disagree with his brief moment of peace, still hammering away despite all efforts to the contrary. Kurama noticed. Kit, you need to calm down. Shut up. He snapped back after the thunderclap of the kitsune's voice. He imagined he must look quite the sight. His eyes bright red and stained with gold, possessed by so much anger his scaro were likely orange, rather than their traditional Colorado. With brisk and efficient breaths he tried to do as his partner had bid, grappling with the seething emotions, and failing. Failing. Just like him, just like Marco, just like that, the frustration and anger spilled over and he roared. Yowled. The bestial howl that sprang forth from his lips set every animal's hackles on end for miles around, caused children to cry in their cribs, and all but started 3 heart attacks back in the town proper. It wasn't the sound of a man, it was the cry of an old god, powerful and ancient in his fury. Were one to listen, they would have realized that the cry was actually a word, a single series of syllables dragging out in a vehement expletive of fury. He beat his fists against the wall, over and over again, soaking his knuckles in crimson, cracking his bones as well as the stone. Every punch was a testament to a centuries-long rage, a soul-deep pain that had never gone away, and a festering wound he knew would never heal. He was what he was what he made himself. He tried to be more. He tried to be better. Each time he'd failed miserably. Darkness constantly flooded him, banging against an already unstable dam made of tainted memories and unstable emotions hidden behind a thin veneer of humor and civility. His hands smashed into the wall until he could no longer recognize them. Even then he kept going. The punching continued until he was panting and dripping in sweat. I hate this, he raged furiously against the unyielding edifice, relentlessly breaking himself against it. I hate it. I hate it. All. Until skin and muscles were shredded, and broken bones exposed. Even still he could have taken another 1,000 swings, but he didn't. Naruto forced himself to exhale with measured precision and imagine all his agony, all his grief, all his guilt, leaving him. The dam refortified. Aches and pains gradually made themselves known to him, tiny jolts of agony shooting up and down his broken arms as his body worked to repair the damage he'd done to himself, but that was okay. The banging had stopped. For now, that was all that mattered. He could breathe again. He could think. He could realize he wasn't alone. So lost had he been in the storm of his own inner turmoil, that he'd failed to realize that he'd been tailed. So intent was he on inflicting retribution on himself, his senses betrayed him. When he turned, he found himself face to face with none other than Petra herself. There was no fear in those warm, hazel eyes. Only pity. She stepped forward out of cover, emerging from the relative shade offered by the trees. Naruto, she began. Don't. He muttered, raising a hand to ward her off. Just. Don't. I'll go to the trial, he said. Just please. No, she set her jaw, refusing to comply. You need to hear this, he cringed aside. I don't need to hear anything. Yes, you do. I'm going to tell you one more time, snapped Naruto, his voice furious. Leave now, refuse and you'll regret it. I'm not going away, Naruto. Foolishly, she continued. When she tried to bring her hand to his cheek, he swatted it away. You can't claim to be responsible for what happened. And who should take responsibility, if not me? He shot her a scalding, withering glare, and she wilted. I trained him. Taught him everything he knew. Naruto felt a twinge of guilt pluck at his chest at the sight of her pained expression, but he pushed past it too angry to consider her feelings. Sorrow and fury were all he felt, all he knew and all he could think. He'd failed him. Mako was gone because he'd failed to impart unto him the one truth of a shinobi. Always be aware of your surroundings. That situational unawareness had cost him his life, ripping away the soul of a good soldier from this world. Everyone insisted that it was his own failure that caused his untimely demise during the defense of Trost. Naruto disagreed. The fault lay not with the student, but with the teacher. With him. It didn't matter what they said, what Gunther, Eld, Aluo, Levi Irwin, or even Petra told him. What Mikasa and the others claimed, he should have done something. Trained him better. Anything. Everyone else had their own skill sets to fall back on, but he'd only ever taught Marco Senjutsu, if only because he didn't seem to have a talent for anything else. It's my fault. Slap. His head snapped aside as a red handprint tattooed itself to his whiskered cheek. Petra lowered her arm, harsh tears glistening in her eyes. Numbed, he laid a hand on his whiskered cheek, flinching slightly at the pain pinprick that greeted the motion. Fury flooded him. Fury, but he couldn't bring himself to lash out despite that fact. Slowly, Petra lowered her arm. A moment of pained silence stretched between the two of them, man and woman, either moving, neither daring to speak. Finally, someone broke it. You think you're the only one who lost someone? When Petra spoke, the words were like a knife to his heart, jagged and sharp, digging deep. Everyone lost someone when the Titans broke through last week. You're not the only one who's hurting. Can't you see that? Can't you see what you're doing to yourself? Humanity needs you. We need you, she said, turning aside, voice breaking, hitching slightly. She caught a flash of confusion, then recognition in those bright blue eyes. Petra, ruthlessly, she cut herself off. When she found her voice again, it sounded almost sad. It doesn't matter what I want, she said, looking him square in the eye. But what you need, her finger jabbed him firmly in the chest, is to stop blaming yourself. Yes, gradually, her voice beamed to rise, warbling slightly. Marco is dead. Gone. Departed. No, there isn't anything you can do about it, unless you learn how to raise the dead when I wasn't looking. And no, it wasn't your fault. He didn't die under your watch. And make her help me, if you keep bawling and don't do something about it. I will. Slap. You. Silly. Naruto had stood silently by as she berated him for his foolishness, head hanging low, utterly unspeaking. Now, slowly, almost reluctantly, he raised his gaze. That really hurt, you know? He groused. The ghost of a smile adjourned the corners of his mouth. There it was. A hint of his old self. Petra colored prettily. Hey, I was just doing my part, she protested. Pulling her arm free, she struck a relaxed, non-confrontational pose. You don't mind that, do you? That depends. He replied wryly. Did you have to slap me? The woman cast a mournful expression and ran one hand back through her hair, twirling it between her fingers in a sustained effort not to look him in the eye. Well, I wasn't planning on it. Seemed to work, though. If it made you smile, then I guess it was worth it. She laughed nervously. He didn't reply to that at first, and she fretted further beneath his penetrating stare. Gods, now I feel like an idiot. As if he would possibly feel. What are you suggesting, exactly? Her heart nearly leapt out of her chest when he took her hand. Done, girl. Petra breathed in and out slowly, steadying herself beneath that smoldering stare. She brought one fingertip up to her pursed lips, then let it glide down over her chin and throat until it rested against her chest beneath the vest. Her voice became husky. Why, I have no idea what you're talking about. What could I possibly be suggesting? Her words trailed off, luring him. Shouldn't you be saving those words for Levi? Came the pointed question. I could, she smiled sweetly, a note of sorrow dampening her desire, if he felt the same. Ah, and there was the truth of it, the reason she'd discarded her silly infatuation. Levi's only love was his duty, and butchering Titans. He might have room in his heart for friends like Erwin, Naruto, and Hang, but anything more? Not bloody likely, as she'd learnt the hard way. Levi was broken inside, much in the way that Naruto was broken as Erwin, Hang, and the rest of the scouting corps were broken. You had to be insane to want to confront Titans outside the walls. And in a way, they were. All of them. They each had their own faults and flaws. Naruto groaned softly to himself as she stepped closer, pushing him back against the great wall. He spun, and suddenly it was she who found herself pressed up against the last bastion of mankind, the cold stone stark and chilly against her back in the evening light. You're impossible. I try. Petra seemed to be falling for men she could never have. Men like Levi. Or Naruto, who, until now, had always deflected her more subtle advances and admiration with snark and good humor. But not Day, it seemed, something had changed. Perhaps Marco's death had broken something inside of him. Perhaps not. Either way, he wasn't turning her aside anymore. Not now. Would you be angry if I kissed you? She asked suddenly. Naruto stared at her, unmoving. In another life, maybe, such an overt flirt might have been enough to startle him. But right now, the curves of her body did nothing but arouse him. It was almost funny, really. Petra had just given him the verbal beatdown of a lifetime, and yet he couldn't help but notice how pretty she looked in the light of the setting sun, the way the fading light caught her eyes and caused them dance. The fate of the entire human race could very well be resting on his shoulders right now, and he was still allowing another pretty face to distract him. A very pretty face, it seemed. Not at all. The words surprised even him. You certainly have a way with words, she said quietly as he inched forward. I try. He mimicked. Then he bent down to and kissed her, softly, sweetly, his body pressing into hers. Her lips parted for him with a soft moan, their tongues tangling, dancing as her arms circled his neck. Petra angled herself to better find his mouth with hers, one leg rising to curl around his waist. Bliss. Yes, that was what it was. Nothing else could possibly hope to describe this heady sensation coursing through her veins. She felt alive for the first time in months, every cell in her body singing as her hands danced over him and his. Her breath parted between the two of them with want and lust, warm plumes of steam fogging the air as they parted to breathe. Then, to her surprise, and without so much as a glimmer of hesitation, Naruto reached down and plucked her off the ground as though she weighed no more than a child. Petra yelped in surprise and held tight for dear life before she realized she was safe, before allowing her other leg to lock around his hips. She was now solely supported by him, fully aware of the bulge grinding against between her legs, and she cursed the clothes that separated them. Every second of it was a terrible torture, one she would tolerate it no longer. She felt his hands settle on her rear, even as hers ghosted beneath that tattered shirt he wore, dancing across the muscles beneath. She used this leverage to tug herself closer, until her lips were nibbling at her ear. "Room," she growled. "Now." Naruto laughed, and with a simple flash of haration, there they were. Clothes flew with reckless abandon. She didn't resist, not in the slightest. As fate would have it, his arrival to the trial the next morning was delayed. Naruto left Petra at home in bed, sparing one last glance for the slender curve of her waist. Mine! The thought stabbed into his mind unexpectedly, surprisingly welcome. His fingers trailed across the supple expanse of skin, drawing a pleasured shiver from her even in sleep. This drew a smile from the sage, and he paused to deliver her a soft peck on the cheek. Her lips lifted in a sleepy smile, still trapped in the throes of bliss-filled slumber. For the time being, Naruto was content to leave her there. Being with Petra had been soothing. It had been slow and tender and sweet, not the relentless savagery and raw passion that had taken him with the nine only a few days prior. They'd taken their time, exploring every inch of one another long into the night. There had been no need to rush. He had enjoyed it. All the guilt pressing down around him had vanished, banished for the moment by the warm afterglow of the night he'd had spent with his old scouting partner. So yes, he'd enjoyed it, and her very, very, very much, just like you enjoyed Annie, eh? Kurama harumphed. You're towing a dangerous line here, boy. Best be careful. That made him wonder. Annie was cold and icy, all jagged edges, even with him at times. By contrast, Petra was warm and soft and sweet, caring and loving. He wasn't entirely certain what to him, only that she was something. He cared for each of them in equal measure, but they probably wouldn't understand that now, would they? He lingered for the merest of moments longer, contemplating this, before finally grabbing his clothes and departing. He fixed the harness to his right and left arm, adjusting those tiny wrist crossbows until he was quite satisfied with his handiwork. The proper flick of his wrist would create a world of hurt for any party unfortunate enough to accost him. Next came the rest of his leathers, his coat and jacket, emblazoned with the wings of freedom, falling over the other, more complex devices he wore. Today was the day of Aaron's trial. It was best to prepare in case the military or kami forbid the crown tried something. Thus armed and armored, he departed his home and strode out into the causeway. He didn't get very far. In the streets people paused to look at him, murmuring softly. That didn't surprise him. Thanks to this whole cult of the nine business, a strange group who seemed to believe he was their chosen messiah and his acts to preserve the integrity of the walls, he was already something of a celebrity. Of course, that had been before Marco's death, before he'd gone and murdered a squad of the king's enforcers in a blind fury. In hindsight, it probably wasn't a wise move, but looking back, he couldn't bring himself to feel guilty. Corrupt bastards deserved what they got. Apparently in their minds, so did he. No sooner had he arrived in the square than he found himself accosted violently. The clicking of triggers was the first real sound of warning. Even then, he didn't pay much attention. It was only when the cloaked shadows emerged from the alleyways, dropped down from the rooftops, that he finally deigned to accept the fact that he'd been hemmed in. That he found himself surrounded. Roughly a dozen in all, they leveled their muskets at him, circling him. Imagine his surprise when he found none other than Nile Dog standing at the head of them all. The thin, reedy man looked slightly ill at ease when faced with his placid expression, as though he feared the shinobi would rear back and bite his head off. Perhaps he might. Well, damn. Naruto whistled softly, eyeing the rifles pointed at his chest, fingers cocked and ready on the triggers. If I'd known you fuckers were going to try something like this, I would have brought snacks. His words sent a ripple of fear shooting through the assembled brigade. So? He asked them. To what do I owe this welcome, Nile? Is this about butchering your men earlier? Because if it is, I'm not sorry. Uzumaki Naruto, Nile swallowed. I'm sorry about this, but by order of His Majesty, you need to come with us to the palace. Immediately. Why? Because I killed those guards? It's deeper than that. The man replied stoically. Please, don't make this any more difficult than it has to be. Naruto weighed his answer for all of an instant before making his decision. There was no way he'd abide by the decisions of a corrupt monarch, and a puppet one at that. Oh, I'm so sorry, but I'm feeling rather difficult today, he answered snarkily. This is a courtesy, anyway. We've already taken your students into custody. Do you think me a fool? The blonde cocked his head aside, scowling. I know for a fact that none of my kids would be captured by you. I trained them better than that. Come now, man, if you're going to bluff, you ought to at least make it a good one. That doesn't change the fact that you'll be coming with us. No, came the reply, his cross-shaped irises regarding them coldly. I don't think I'll be going anywhere with you. A deep, yawning sensation opened under Nile. I'm afraid I must insist, he declared, suddenly not nearly as sure of that as he had been moments ago. Naruto shook his head slowly, sadly, the motion sending his bangs swaying from side to side. No, he repeated. Why, you've got nothing. One of his men, a male, laughed at what he thought to be folly. Nothing but your bloody knives and your fancy karate gimmicks. We have guns. Whatever offense diatribe the man had been preparing to spout aborted prematurely when the business end of a kunai slammed into his forehead with a dull thunk, burying itself to the hilt in a fountain of scarlet. Eyes rolling back, words trailing off into an unintelligible gurgle, the guardsmen collapsed, dead at their feet. The casual attack struck Nile as sharply as if the knife had cut into him instead. The yawning sensation deepened into an abyss. There was an awful silence after that. Mercifully, this sudden and unexpected savagery ended the man's life relatively painlessly. By the time his brain would register the fatal wound, he was already dead. He didn't live to see the hot spray of bloody viscera that spattered across his comrades, never noticed the awful pool of red spreading from his corpse, and still, the moment of awful silence persisted. Naruto, having barely moved after throwing that knife, simply cocked his head and surveyed his handiwork intently. Naruto chortled. It was a deep, throaty chuckle as everyone drew back from him. No, he goaded quietly for the third time, what you have are bullets and the hope that when your guns are empty, I'll no longer be standing, because if I am, another knife flicked into his hand. You'll all be dead before you've reloaded. In the tension that followed, someone was foolish enough to fire. The woman's rifle barked, a ball of iron lead leaping from the barrel to slam into the man's unprotected shoulder. Naruto grunted, staggering in surprise and shock, his features twisting in a grimace of pained agony. That gave someone enough courage to fire their own weapon, then another. And another. And another still. Shots erupted in the square, sending civilians shrieking and scurrying for cover. The precious few that stayed to watch averted their eyes as the military police exempting the horrified Nile riddled their savior with holes. Stop, you idiots! He roared, raising his arm. Stop shooting. They did not stop. And amidst the gunpowder and flint, he saw the blonde smiling, grinning for every shot that struck home. He knew at once that the man had gotten his way. And more. Exactly as he'd planned. For the military to open fire on the savior of Trost without witnesses was one thing, but when innocent bystanders were there to see the deed firsthand, to watch an unarmed, unaggressive man shot to pieces. It had all the beginnings of a revolt in the making. Vaguely, he recalled Owen's words earlier in the evening. He'd flat out admitted to his old friend what his orders were, what the Crown's intentions were for the man who seemed too intent on usurping it. And Erwin had tried to talk him down. He hadn't listened. You don't want to make him angry, Nile, why? He'd scoffed. Even with all his gifts, he's still just a man. Men can be arrested. Killed. Owen had just looked at him in pity, as though he were admonishing a petulant child. He'd shaken his head. No, he may act like it, but Uzumaki Naruto, without a doubt, is not human. Now, he realized too late his foolishness in following the Crown. No, he had to stop this. Now, cease fire. He cried for 15th time. Goddammit, cease fire. Finally, blessedly, the soldiers obeyed. Some fumbled to reload, grasping at their belts for more ammunition. Too slowly, Nile realized, as the corpse shifted. Far too slow. Naruto straightened slowly, woodenly, like a puppet severed from its strings. Half of his right arm was falling off, and his stomach bore a gaping hole. But even as they looked on, the shinobi stood in blatant defiance of his injuries, cracked his knuckles, and smiled. My turn, teach-en, he blurred. There could be no other word for it. One moment the shinobi was standing still and stoic, the next, he was gone and a knife was at his throat. Around him, 5 men lay dead. 2 lay on the cobblestones bleeding from severed necks, their heads tethered to their bodies by the merest strips of flesh and bone. Another sported a kunai lodge right over his heart, the 4th seemed to be suffering from a heart attack, and the 5th. Damn, but he couldn't even recognize the poor sod in all that gore. The others were no more than bloodstains on the walls and streets. A hand here, a foot there, someone's severed head. Well then, Naruto purred, pressing the kunai closer to his throat, mercilessly drawing him away from the grisly massacre. It seems this is checkmate, old boy. Nile gulped, glancing at his two remaining soldiers. The poor boys looked like they were about to piss themselves in fear. No wait, one already had. WW, what are you? He rasped out. How are you alive? Beneath this face there is more than flesh, more than muscle and bone. He answered as the last of his wounds sizzled shut. Beneath this face there is an ideal. And ideals are bulletproof. I wonder if you're the same when it comes to knives? The weapon pushed coldly against his Adam's apple, drawing a trickle of red from his Adam's apple. Nile's control slipped, and he began trembling. Wave after familiar wave of dread washed over him as he stared into those pitiless saffron eyes, the eyes of a sage, impervious to everything the world threw at him. He'd gladly face down an entire Titan horde than deal with this madman. Now, Naruto continued amicably, would you kindly tell your men to stand down before I kill them, too? Through a trembling jaw, Nile found his mouth forming the words stand. Stand down. All units stand down. They didn't need to be told twice. The poor sod slumped to the ground almost before the words were out of his mouth. Naruto lowered his knife and clapped his hands together, as if in delight, though his expression put paid to that assumption. Yes. That's right. Well done, you. I can't believe you killed them. He looked innocently at the commander. Is there a problem? Nile rapidly shook his head. The blonde grinned. Good man. That wasn't so bad, was it? I only had to kill. What was it this time, 5? 7? 10? Yeah, he decided to himself, sounds like 10. 10. Looks like you boys were finally starting to learn. Nile wisely chose a safer route and held his tongue, rather than warn the blonde that the king would doubtlessly try to wreak vengeance on him for this. But that mockery would render his life forfeit now, wouldn't it? So instead he chose to keep his mouth shut, preserve his own life, and let the man walk away. Thus whistling, Naruto trotted away, spring in his step down the street to the Grand Cathedral where the trial was no doubt being held. Time to crash the party. A/NA, and there we have it, folks. First, to answer some questions. In canon, it took 3 days for Eren to wake up after passing out at the wall. Here, it takes an additional 4 days for anyone to track down Naruto and rein him in. Furthermore, Naruto can be surprised. He can be killed. It just takes a hell of a lot, like a headshot or decapitation, to really put him down. We see that the monarchy isn't as accepting of Naruto as we first assumed. He's got a small cult revolving around him and his girls Petra included, it seems, and now he's slowly digging himself out of the hole caused by Marco's death. What will be the repercussions for Annie attacking Marco? Did she even do it? Did the blade ever connect? Or did someone else have a hand in this dastardly deed? The plot thickens. This can't possibly end well. What will happen? Who will live? Who will die? Will Naruto survive their righteous female fury? Find out next time on I'm Only Human, So. In the immortal words of Atlas, review. Would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Drama incoming. Preview. Naruto felt his throat run dry when he saw it, the Titan storming towards them. He watched, numbed, as she dispatched 2 more riders, swatting them from their mounts with almost contemptuous ease. Without any semblance of thought, he spun, skidding to a halt behind Petra and the other horses, sending the ground shaking. Dimly, he was aware of her shout. Naruto, go! He thundered, and then the enemy stormed into view. Bright blonde hair danced before his peripherals as he beheld the female Titan. For a moment, just a moment, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sheer incredulity blinded him to what he was witnessing, reality refusing to assert itself. He stood there in his Titan form, his 6 arms falling slack as he beheld the juggernaut storming towards him. Dread opened beneath him in an abyss, threatening to send his spirits plummeting all over again. But they didn't. Instead, the sword, the flames of anger burning all too brightly in his heart. He stepped forward, saw the light dancing in her eyes, the determination, the grief, the pained resolution. His own hardened. Annie, she screamed at him, and he echoed the bellow. He was running almost before he knew it, his long stride eating up the ever-shrinking distance between them even as she surged forward to meet him. He had time for a single thought, a lone inquiry deep in the darkest depths of his mind. Why? Why was she doing this? Why was she betraying everyone she'd ever known? Then they collided. Life, cheers, the hearty sounds of laughter, and clinking mugs resounded throughout the night. To Eren's Iman. Imikpa. Emancipation. Yeah, that. Naruto's drunken slur boomed through the lodge in a hoarse laugh. Echoes of mirth and merriment echoed after his declaration, accompanied by a smell that would have made a man's mouth water. The succulent scent of freshly cooked meat wafted out into the starry evening, drowned out now by another, newer cry of, to all our new recruits, Kampai, to the fallen, Kampai, to tomorrow's mission, Kampai. With a final, resounding clatter, glasses collided and the celebration swung itself back into a frenzy once more. Ordinarily, such festivities were a rare sight for these grim heroes. They did not party down as Naruto had once put it, even after their few triumphs. But today, nearly the entire scouting corps had gathered to revel in this momentous occasion. Tonight, they welcomed new recruits into their ranks to replace those they had lost. Out of all the surviving rookies, everyone, even Mina, had elected to join the scouting corps. Tomorrow, these intrepid Titan killers would be venturing beyond the walls with them, all the way to the outskirts of Wall Maria, the place of Eren's birth, and to a secret that could destroy the Titans forever. Naruto had never been so happy to have the fox in his stomach until this very moment. He could get absolutely sloshed and not feel any ill effects tomorrow. The others didn't have that satisfaction. Mikasa and the rest might be considered too young to partake of alcohol, but Erwin and his comrades still nursed mugs of their own. None were as deep into their cups as him, and he knew he had to be acting like a complete fool, but every second of sheer incredulity was worth it. "You are insane," Levi drawled, looking up from his own mug with heavily lidded eyes. "You know that, right? You're insane. I think we all know that." Naruto cackled as he picked a piece of food out of his teeth. "It's the crazy bird that gets the worm, after all." No, wait, that's not right." "Ah, forget it." Before anyone, least of all Erwin, could think to further berate him for his behavior, the blonde returned his attention to the thigh bone clutched in his hand and took a chunk of it out with his teeth, digging into it with the reckless abandon that so defined him, determined to enjoy this night, especially when it might be his last. "Oh, hush," Kurama snorted. "Don't go all melodramatic on me. You're not going to die." "Well," Naruto shot back with a thought, "maybe not, but I don't know about the rest." "All the more reason to enjoy tonight." Evidently someone agreed with him. "What kind of idiot crashes a trial when they're covered in blood?" "This guy." "Yup. Me. Right here." Naruto waved merrily at a baffled Gunther from his seat at the table, someone managing to not spill a single drop of ale despite the jerky motions. "Sides, it wasn't my blood and those bastards wanted to detain me. Naturally, I attacked first, asked questions later. Ain't that right, Mirithyana?" The last word emerged like a silken purr as his mouth brushed his student's neck, lips ghosting across her skin in a smooth line that reduced the poor girl to a stuttering mess in his lap. "Naruto-sensei, that's not fair," she whined. "Ah, I told you, just Naruto will do." The blackhead squeaked softly, her cheeks rosy. Having partaken of some liquor of her own, that flush wasn't born entirely from embarrassment. Naruto cackled and continued to tease her. Alyo arched an eyebrow. "You're seriously okay with this, Petra? Isn't he cheating on you?" Petra only smiled. "He's like a hurricane, you can't chain him down. And besides, he..." Her words trailed off into gibberish as the rest of her squad stared at her. "He what?" Levi frowned. Petra's flush deepened. "He's... well... a very loving person." "Ain't it the truth?" ELD merely facepalmed. "I'm all for enjoying yourself before battle, but this guy..." Jean deadpanned, groaning. "This guy is supposed to be our best hope tomorrow. All the king's horses, and all the king's men." The blonde sang drunkenly, Mina joining in for the second verse. "Ain't nobody gonna put them back together again. Come on, Sasha. Join us. All the king's horses, and all the king's mean." "Yup." Levi nodded. "Crazy. How much did that bastard have to drink?" "Not enough, apparently," Owen observed with a small smile as he watched the blonde swept Mina off her feet and begin dancing with her like a complete buffoon. "Let him enjoy himself while he can. We each have our own ways of preparing for battle. This is his, so him getting smashed is his way of coping? I call bullshit." "Speaking of that," Hanji sighed, "I still can't believe he bullshitted them into letting Eren go. How do you walk in and threaten to crush the city with a straight face like that? You had the authorities terrified." "What can I say?" Naruto called back. "I have a gift." "Oh, I know you have gifts," the madwoman grinned, drooling. "I still want to see them." The look in her eye was particularly unnerving even at a distance, Naruto thought. She always got this way whenever it came to anything related Titans, like that giant fox of yours. Reiner quipped. "Haven't seen it in a while." "Come on, you know I don't use that form here. I'd crush everything. Total overkill, you know?" Unfortunately, Hanji wasn't about to let up. "Come on, Naruto-tan. Let me experiment on UGH. A light kick sent her sailing across the room. "Back off, crazy. No more experiments tonight." Everyone was celebrating, enjoying themselves. All save Annie. Honestly, she continued to surprise him, that one. Instead of joining the military police, something she'd sworn up and down to do with or without his consent, yet here she was with the rest of them, bearing the proud emblem of the Scout Corps on her back. He'd never been more proud of her, and for a time, she'd been almost affectionate with him in the wake of Marco's death. Until tonight. Tonight she'd been cold, distant. Not just to him, but everyone. As though they didn't exist at all, as though they were all a dream. Now she looked positively green. I'm not feeling well. Going to bed, she muttered, brushing past him. Try not to burn the place down. Naruto shrugged. No promises. His eyes flicked after the one who followed her, frowning. Annie hunched over and vomited. All of her dinner, what remained of it, came lurching up out of her throat, depositing itself into the basin. Not again. It had been like this for too long now. She knew it wasn't poison. It couldn't be. Many had tried before, without success. She was immune to such things. So what was it? Her body had been ill for some time now, acting strange, very strange indeed. She didn't understand it. No. Not at all. By all rights, her body should have fought this off by now if it was an infection. Ugh. As if to deny that very thought, she vomited again, her body bending double over the sink. Trembling hands fumbled at the faucet, turning the knob, washing the bile away. God, she hadn't felt this bad since she'd last had her pee. Her mind took pause at that, thinking. Counting back the days. Too many days. It was late. She was late. Oh no. Glassy blue eyes bulged. No, no, no. No, 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 no. Her fist struck the mirror without thinking, shattering the glass into a dozen jagged pieces. The broken remnants stared back at her, a reflection twisted and distorted. Just like her. She hadn't planned for this. It hadn't even occurred to her, that 1 in a million chance. But the signs were impossible to ignore, especially now. It all made sense, and yet none at all. Everything was spiraling out of control. It's his, isn't it? Annie's spine shot ramrod straight. A figure detached itself from the shadows of her door. A slim, wiry form she knew all too well. He'd followed her in here. Her hand closed around one of the glass pieces, squeezing with enough force to bloody her palm, but even then, they didn't depart. When she made no move to speak, did nothing but glower at them, they frowned. Getting sentimental, are we? What more do you want from me? What we want is for you to stop messing around and complete your mission, came the annoyed reply. This little love story of yours needs to end, now. You should have killed him a long time ago. Instead, you devote yourself to a man who sleeps with a different girl at almost every opportunity. Now you're carrying his seed. He scoffed. You're a disgrace to our kind. I don't care about that. She snapped. I care. Yes, 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 you care about your precious Naruto, blah, blah, blah. Her foot shot out at blinding speed, catching them in the chest. Heartless as ever towards me, I see. A muscle jumped in her jaw. TCH. Just because you killed Marco. Ah, but your precious teacher thinks it was a titan that finished him, doesn't he? What if he thought it was you? Pearly white teeth flashed in the dark, thin lips curling in a sneer. It would be such a shame, wouldn't it? Your beloved teacher, the father of your child. He wouldn't hesitate to cut you down if he thought you killed one of his precious students. As if he'd ever believe you. Ah, but I don't need him to believe me. I just need to make him suspicious. And that seed of doubt will poison him to you. Annie glowered at him, her eyes icy blue daggers. She hadn't been the one to kill Marco. But she had been the one to attack first. The one responsible for that was him, currently holding the deed over her head like an axe. It was her greatest shame. Flashback, clang. The sharp crack of a broken blade reverberated through Trost District. Annie stared at her shattered sword in disbelief, gawping at the broken edge. She hadn't drawn blood. It was like striking diamond. The moment her weapon made contact, it shattered like so much glass. Worse, her offhand strike had left her overbalanced, presenting her opponent with the perfect opportunity to attack. Her life was over. She'd struck at him in a panic, fearing that he might know her secret, and now she'd failed. Her eyes squeezed shut, preparing herself for death. It never came. After a full 5 seconds she dared to open her eyes. Marco was frowning at her, experimentally rubbing the small rent she'd opened in his coat. He didn't look angry. Just surprised. Golden eyes stared back at her inquisitively. The same eyes that had identified her as one of the Titans. Those same damn eyes. Why'd you do that? He asked. It's not like I was going to tell anyone. Panic raged through her like a flash flood, drowning out all reason. He does know. Kill him. Kill him now. Instinct took over, her body leaping backwards even as the young man turned to face her. Why didn't you kill me? It'd make Sensei sad? Marco rolled his shoulders, shrugging lightly. And besides, there wasn't any killing intent in your blade. Then those golden-black irises of the sage faded from his eyes. He offered her a weary smile, sheathing the blade in his left hand and offering her his right. Annie knew this was her best chance. She could strike now and he'd take her secret with him to the grave. And yet, despite her brain screaming at her to move, she couldn't do it. See? Marco smiled. You're not a bad person, Annie. I don't understand your reasoning, but if you won't tell anyone? Absolutely. Your secret's safe with me. Her never saw the other blade until it found his spine from behind. Marco. And flashback. Annie wanted to strangle him. I wish you didn't exist. She wanted to transform, reach across and crush her fellow shifter to a bloody past in her hand. But she couldn't. And the little bastard knew it. In the time that it took her to shift, he'd escape. More than that, he could easily overpower her, even in that form. Worse, changing here would destroy the building, all her friends. Her fear must have shown, because they laughed at her. You've gotten soft. Teeth ground together so hard she nearly created a spark. When this is over, I'm going to kill you. They merely laughed at her, their face still hidden in the shadows of the moonlight. Oh, Annie, Annie, Annie. You say the nicest things, you bitch. Bertholdt's words warped into a strangled snarl as the sharpened shard of glass flew from her hand to sink into his collarbone, 3 inches deep. Not a fatal wound, but the pain was almost enough to make him scream like a child. Oh, she would pay for that. His hand wrapped around it, pulling it free. But when next he looked, the window was open, and Annie long gone. Meanwhile, with Mina and Naruto, I'm about to have sex with my teacher. It was a horrible, terrible, dirty, naughty and downright lurid thought, but it was the only clear thought Mina Carolina could bring herself to think here in this moment. Losing her virginity. Alcohol dulled her thoughts to a warm, pleasant buzz as her mouth moved against his, her hips bucking against his cursing. The barrier of their clothes. The black braid of her hair came swiftly undone beneath calloused fingers, freeing her ebon tresses to fall freely behind her jacket, then her back as he divested her of her cloak. To his eyes, with her dark hair sprawled out behind her, Mina looked like an angel. In turn her fingers tugged apart at his jacket, fumbling awkwardly at the brass buttons. Laughter rumbled into her mouth between their tongues and she only fumbled even more, sputtering helplessly. It certainly didn't help when he stopped kissing her mouth, trailing a line down her neck then her collarbone, and now her bra until he put his mouth there. With a single snip of those sharpened teeth her bra broke open exposing her ample chest to the world. Mina didn't have time to be embarrassed by the sudden exposure. She was too busy trying not to come on the spot as he attacked her with his mouth. Her back arched as he took one breast and started suckling it, tongue rolling loosely over the nipple. Taking it between his teeth. Biting, hard, Mina's body betrayed her in that instant, and she felt her nether lips become slick against her panties. Naruto's throaty chuckle told her he knew exactly what he'd done. "'S not fair," she murmured against his mouth. "Stop teasing me, here," he mumbled, helping her. She was painfully clumsy at all this and they both knew it, but he humored her, and eventually, she succeeded. Under her touch his jacket and battered shirt fell away, exposing the hard plane of his chest. So many scars. So many she couldn't even begin to count, couldn't possibly hope to touch them all. She knew Naruto was well and capable of regeneration, but these marks had been carved into his very flesh. Still she tried to see the lot of them all. Her fingertips lingered over one in particular, a great gouge in his flesh where his lung should have been. What kind of attack could have done such damage? Her fear must have shown, because he abruptly ceased his ministrations. "Life leaves its marks on you. These are mine." A pause, and when next he looked at her, he sounded surprisingly sober. "Look, I'd understand if you want to stop. We're both hammered beyond belief right now, and I don't want to take advantage of YMPH. Mina silenced him with her lips, tongue tangling with his. "You wearing too many clothes." Well, that answered that. Gently, almost tentatively, he pushed her back to the bed. Blue eyes admired her. There was lust there to be certain, but another, more powerful emotion as well. Ardor, hope, love. She couldn't rightly regard him as her teacher anymore, Mina realized. She was a part of the scouting corps now. Naruto was no longer her immediate superior, no longer the one in charge of her. That role fell to Erwin, and the rest. This sudden epiphany made her feel just a little bit better about taking advantage of him, but he was still staring. What? Don't stare at me like that. She squirmed beneath his gaze, covering her chest. It's embarrassing. Beautiful. He murmured. Absolutely beautiful. If there were any lingering doubts in that instant, those words charred them to ash. Her mouth lunged up to meet him again, her hands tangling in his hair, his hands hooking around her waist. She barely even noticed the sudden lack of pants as he tugged them away, followed by her panties. At some point he must have removed his own pants and boxers, because she could feel his firm rod pressing against her entrance. A trickle of anxiety wormed its way into her heart. I really hope it doesn't hurt as much as they say it does. She couldn't bring herself to feel sorry about it as her body crashed down to the bed with Naruto, the springs giving a weak protest under their combined weight as he entered her. There was an awful eternity of pain as he slid into her sheath, causing her fingers to grip tight against the sheets. He moved slowly against her, and gradually the pain began to ebb. You like that? Naruto grunted. The pain should be gone by now, and it was. In its place came another sensation altogether, a strange euphoria she had absolutely no chance of describing. Yes, Mina was on cloud nine. Yes, yes, words meant nothing to her, the world consisted only of the two of them. Yes, 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 her skin was hypersensitive now, warm to the touch. It wasn't long before the pain vanished completely, before she was gasping beneath him, her cries warping into soft mews of delight. Every instant had her writhing in pleasure, her hips arching up to meet his. Yes, 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 every fiber of her being bliss. There could be no other word for it. Every touch, every thrust only raised her high, pushed her closer and closer to the edge. Her legs hooked around his waist and drew him closer, urging him deeper, harder, faster. And then, with one final, towering shout, master and student crashed over and into the abyss, together, and many times that night. The dawn was upon them almost before they knew it. Sharpened shards of sunlight stabbed down at Naruto's well-rested face, obliterated by a jaw-popping yawn. Mina wished she possessed such vitality. Naruto was up and about as though nothing had happened last night at all, the picture of health and happiness. She was trying her utmost not to limp. A sympathetic glance from Petra only made her feel a little better and failing miserably. Now she had to deal with the daunting task of riding horseback with this dull pain between her legs. Just sitting on the damned beast hurt. But even the pain wasn't enough to make her regret her first time. Her only prayer was that she didn't accidentally wind up pregnant. Still sore? Naruto asked, checking her reins. Mina groaned. I really don't want to ride a horse. Yeah. That's gonna hurt. Unless. He flicked his fingers, a touch of green medical chakra covering them. She looked at him like a kicked puppy. Please? Subtly, he pressed 2 fingers to her hip. Just like that, the agony receded to a dull ache, then a mere twinge. Still annoying, but certainly tolerable compared to last night. Now here they were nearly the entire scouting corps facing the opening gate. Within mere moments, they would set out into a world full of titans and death. The thought made her heart lurch. Has anyone seen Annie? Someone asked. Naruto shrugged, turning his head. Well, she said she wasn't feeling well last night. Then why didn't she tell anyone else? Whatever else he might have said was drowned out by Erwin's voice. Onward. With a resounding clatter of hooves, they were off. Naruto dug his feet into the ground and bounded after them. It's like a friend of mine once said. If you only focus on making the best moves, you won't win. Truer words had never been spoken, and they also spelled the end. Mere hours into his ride, the flares started going off. That itself wasn't much cause for concern. The shaking of the ground, well, that was another matter. Naruto felt his throat run dry when he saw it, the Titan storming towards them. He watched, numbed, as she dispatched 2 more riders, swatting them from their mounts with almost contemptuous ease. Without any semblance of thought, he spun, skidding to a halt behind Petra and the other horses, sending the ground shaking. Dimly, he was aware of her shout. Naruto, go! He thundered, and then the enemy stormed into view. Bright blonde hair danced before his peripherals, cold blue eyes dancing as he beheld the female Titan. Instinct took over. Naruto sank his teeth into his thumb and bit down hard. A bolt of lightning screamed down from the heavens, striking him head-on, and the beast emerged. For a moment, just a moment, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sheer incredulity blinded him to what he was witnessing, reality refusing to assert itself. He stood there in his Titan form, his 6 arms falling slack as he beheld the juggernaut storming towards him. Dread opened beneath him in an abyss, threatening to send his spirits plummeting all over again. But they didn't. Instead, the sword, the flames of anger burning all too brightly in his heart. He stepped forward, saw the light dancing in her eyes, the determination, the grief, the pained resolution. His own hardened. Annie, she screamed at him, and he echoed the bellow. He was running almost before he knew it, his long stride eating up the ever-shrinking distance between them even as she surged forward to meet him. He had time for a single thought, a lone inquiry deep in the darkest depths of his mind. Why? Why was she doing this? Why was she betraying everyone she'd ever known? Why? Then they collided. Annie wanted to weep. She knew what was happening, was painfully conscious of every action she took. Saw Naruto turn at her approach, dig his feet into the ground and stare her down. Part of her prayed that he just stand aside and allow her to pass, but he was simply too stubborn for that. She saw him change, heard his roar of challenge, and knew what would happen. He was fire, and she, ice. She'd been a fool for deceiving herself, for thinking that he could ever coexist with her. Only one of them would walk away from this, because they, the both of them, were far too stubborn to have it any other way. So why was she crying? Raya. With a battle cry that shook the entire forest to its very roots, the titans collided. Ajura and female titan barreled into one another like a hurricane. 6 fists smashed against 2, swinging with savage precision. The supposedly gentle ninja was literally matching her blow for blow, taking all her grief, all her savagery, and returning it with something just as angry. Wrath. Hatred. Spite. The two beasts collided again and again and again, tossing one another every which way, destroying entire acres as they went. He gave as good as he got, bloodying and bruising him, wounds opening and healing as black and scarlet pounded upon one another. They battled hand to hand, a great fire filling them both as they sought to stifle the life out of one another. Trees were used as bludgeons, wounds were inflicted and healed instantaneously, no quarter given, none asked. There was only the battle. Annie lunged, striking with her fist and feet. The first 3 blows were deflected by the wall of those arms. Annie's 4th blow struck swift and true, her diamond-hard heel cracking into the Ajura's lower jaw, shearing it free in a shower of black blood. Naruto didn't flinch at the loss of his mouth. It was already regenerating by the time she felt the counterattack. 2 arms snapped up, ripping the limb free just as the other 4 slammed into her stomach with all the forces of a small avalanche. A hand closed around her head and yanked, trying to pull her visage free. Her head snapped backwards, shattering the beast's face. Another giant arm shot out, the reverse heel palm striking her square in the head. Face. Stomach. Every blow was met with another blow. Naruto and Annie slammed together with a sickening thud, a shuddering impact that sent both beasts reeling away, only to come together once again. Howls and thrashes accompanied their charge, the intensity of their rage shaking all the world around them. Why are you doing this? Nothing could stand between them. You don't understand. Then make me, goddammit, Annie lashed out, striking a backhanded blow against the demon's gnashing jaw. Naruto staggered. Then, in an impossible movement, the 6-armed entity drooped to the floor and spun, smashing a fist into his adversary's snarling visage in a satisfying spurt of bleak blood. The cold ground kissed her face, and she lay there for a moment, stunned. A black foot slammed down onto her back, clawed feet digging into the meat of her shoulders. 6 arms pinned her down, forcing her face into the ground. His body crashed down on hers, straddling her. Somehow, Annie managed to turn her head in time, looking up in horror as a white, gaping maw loomed over her with sinister intent. Naruto, her fellow blonde, didn't hesitate. His head jerked forwards and those teeth found flesh, tearing her neck free. Sunlight filled her vision. Annie looked up, gawping at him, eyes wide with fear. Again, no hesitation. She was so frozen with fear that she couldn't even think straight. All she could see were those teeth, those awful, terrible teeth. Naruto opened his mouth. All she saw was blackness, a shower of blood, and the world shattered like glass. Is that what you wanted to see? The blood turned to ice in Reiner's veins from his treetop perch. Shit. Dimly before his very eyes everything slipped away, the genjutsu vanishing as he looked on. The sword to his throat, however, was painfully real. His mind reeled, desperately trying to make sense of it all as the simple illusion dissipated. He couldn't even begin to turn, to wonder at what was happening. No. One of them should be dead. They had to be. A warm tuft of breath snaked across the back of his neck, drawing a shudder. Had it been real at all? Or was the death merely fake too? No, there. He saw Annie's spit-soaked form plastered to a tree intact, the giant, broken bodies of 2 steaming titans smoldering away to ash and bone. A ruined forest. And emerging from one of those bodies, moving to her, his arms closing around her, carrying her. Naruto? But then who had the blade to his throat? How? The Kagebunshin bared its teeth and snarled. Hello? Friend. Reiner Braun could only sputter incoherently. Clone. Of course he'd made a shadow clone, the clever bastard. A heart-stopping hiss emanated from those jaws. I've been watching you for some time, but I wasn't sure until last night. The blade drew closer to his throat. You tried to manipulate one of my girls. Tried to make me kill her. Now I'm going to end it. The blade trembled against his jugular, vibrating with emotion. Starting with you, and then your little fuck buddy. How dare you kill my precious student? I have blundered. That was Reiner's last and final thought before the blonde dragged the blade across his throat in a shower of blood. A slash and the conspiracy is revealed. Annie's innocent. Now let the battles begin. Naruto vs. Colossal Titan next chapter. And there we have it, folks. First, to answer some questions. In canon, it took 3 days for Eren to wake up after passing out at the wall. Here, it takes an additional 4 days for anyone to track down Naruto and rein him in. Furthermore, Naruto can be surprised. He can be killed. It just takes a hell of a lot, like a headshot or decapitation, to really put him down. I'm only human, so. In the immortal words of Atlas, review. Would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Hope it makes you smile. There'll be 2 of them this time. Kudos to thee who get the TFS reference. Preview. Mine. Berthold cocked his head, listening. Do you hear that? Mine. Now that Jean listened, he did hear something. Mine. And it sounds like a lot like mine. Yeah, it does. Mine. Crunch. Berthold grunted in surprise as a sparking fist found his face, launching him out of the tree with all the speed of a Hellfire missile. His body tumbled wildly in the air, hands scrabbling for a handhold and finding none. A tether shot out, anchoring him to a tree, slowing his descent, and then they hit him again. With a truncated scream, the shifter crashed to the forest floor, landing awkwardly on his leg. The dull crunch of bones signaled the obliteration of his right knee, but in that instant, he had other concerns. A shadow cast itself over him in blood relief, the scarlet specter standing over him, covered in his comrade's Reiner blood and grinning like the devil himself. Oh hell! Naruto stood over him and lowered his smoking fist, grinning like a madman. Mine. Am I missing something here? Annie and Petra remained scarlet. I'm pregnant. Oh. You're just pregnant. The both of you. Naruto flared sage mode, saw it, promptly blew a smoke ring and passed out. Where are your gods? Mine. Berthold cocked his head as a distant whisper pierced the forest, listening. Oddly enough, it wasn't fading away. If anything, it seemed to be growing louder. Mine. It sounded like a cry now, more than a call. Whatever it was, whomever, it droned on, an incessant chant that grated on his already frayed nerves, one that threatened to snap the thin strings of his patience, and send him into a panicked frenzy. A cold and bitter sweat broke out across his brow, his once staid gaze narrowing in primal fright as the distant clamor drew ever closer. Mine. Yes, the longer he listened, the more certain he became. He'd heard that voice countless times in the past. No. It couldn't be him. He was dead. He had to be. Annie was meant to soften him up, then Reiner would swoop in for the kill. That he heard his voice now, felt this killer intent, told him that his comrades had failed, and that alternative meant, mine. Nervous, he risked a glance at the only other human within earshot. Jean had taken up a post beside him, his sharp eyes watchful for any sign of movement below. If he'd yet had the ruckus, he gave no indication of having done anything about it. Was he in on it then? Or was it merely his own horrid paranoia acting up again? If any force though her cooperation had been and Reiner hadn't been able to stop him. What chance did he have? The thought chilled the shifter to the bone. Do you hear that? Mine. Now that Jean listened, he did hear something. Mine. And it sounds like a lot like mine. Yeah, it does. Mine. Crunch. Berthold grunted in surprise as a sparking fist found his face, launching him out of the tree with all the speed of a plunging comet. His body tumbled wildly in the air, hands scrabbling for a handhold and finding none. A tether shot out, anchoring him to a tree, slowing his descent. He had to think, had to fight, had to find a way out. Strong fingers, firm and stern, latched around his face. For a terrifying moment all he saw was that shadow, that eerie, horrible shadow, a dark blot leering out at him through the cracks between his bloodied fingers. Face to face with his attacker at last, he found that words and reason had abandoned him. There was only instinct. Frantic, he lashed out with both his blades, only to watch helplessly as the hardened steel shattered against his teacher's upturned limbs. A furious hiss greeted his desperate efforts, and the vice on his visage tightened, drawing blood. Then the bastard threw him. With a truncated scream, the shifter crashed to the forest floor, landing awkwardly on his leg. The dull crunch of bones signaled the obliteration of his right knee, but in that instant, he had other concerns. A shadow cast itself over him in blood relief, the scarlet specter standing over him, covered in his comrade's Reiner blood and grinning like the devil himself. The shifter yelped, and flung up an arm to defend himself in a feeble effort to protect his face against the oncoming assault. It saved his life. The flung knife, he hadn't even seen it, thudded home against his hand with vicious strength, wedging itself deep into muscle and bone. He could see the point of the dagger sticking out through the back of his palm like some grisly arrow, slick with his blood. Berthold stared back at it, numbed, his mind unable to feel the pain, to realize what had just happened. This wasn't happening. No, it couldn't be happening. He'd planned this out so well, he'd been so damnably careful. Boy, that snapped him back to reality post-haste. Naruto stood only yards away, lowered his outstretched hand, looking like death itself. He'd seen better days. Someone had ripped up his beloved jacket and laid into the flesh beneath, leaving it one massive red-black bruise. Another Reiner, perhaps, had managed to gouge out his right eye. Those were always slow to heal, but the remaining orb blazed with fire, a towering blaze that threatened to swallow him up and spit him back out as a charred corpse. For all his wounds, perhaps in spite of them, he still stood, and he was absolutely livid. "I took you in," he began slowly, the words a molten snarl of breath, "treated you like one of my own." Scarlet chakra thrummed around them with every word, burning like a small sun in the dark depths of the forest's slumber. "And yet you have the nerve, the gall, the asinine intent to do this? To betray me? My family? To kill Marco and use Annie to get to me?" It was nothing per. Naruto flicked two fingers in a sharp, decisive, downward motion. Thunk. A strange, curious weightlessness settled in the pit of Bertholdt's right arm. It didn't take him long to recognize the source, to see the ruptured stump that had once been a limb, to see the bits of bone peeking out just above where his elbow had once existed. This time, there was no escaping the pain. Stranger still, a wild noise was buzzing in his ears, as if some great beast were howling at the top of his lungs. By the time he realized he was the one screaming, his mentor had gotten a great deal closer. Two fingers rose again, ready to direct another slicing current of wind at him. "Any last words before I chop you into little bits like I did your friend?" Wait a second. Syllables sputtered out of Bertholdt in a rush, though he knew they'd do him little good. Can't we talk about this?" Time. He had to buy himself time. Naruto was already advancing on him, already drawing a knife. He could still see Jean up in the trees, but so far away. Too far. Naruto wasn't going to stop to answer questions. He wasn't going to wait and offer an explanation for this seemingly abrupt assault, this unprovoked attack that was anything but. He wasn't going to make the mistake of attacking from a distance, not like before. He'd come in close and take off his head, just to be sure. God, he might even kill him slowly. "Talk all you like. It won't change anything." Naruto moved with impossible speed, slicing down at his head, prepared to cut through Bertholdt's other arm to get at him. Panic took hold of him, strangling all sense and reason. "He's going to kill me." And then, Bertholdt did the only thing he could think to do. He bit down on his tongue, hard. A ways below, Naruto threw up an arm and channeled chakra to his palm. He knew right away that it wouldn't be enough. "Oh, fuck me. Jean. Get due, Tum." Sasha fared better than most. Connie?" She gulped anxiously, gazing at the sky. "What?" Her fellow student wasn't looking at the horizon. His attention remained firmly rooted on the milling titans leagues below their feet. A small horde had gathered at their approach. A few even hazarded the climb to try and reach them, inevitably failing and crashing back to the ground with dull crunches, broken bones, and disappointed groans. A few moments before, Sasha had been content to watch as well. Not anymore. "Connie!" she cried, shaking him. He turned aghast and saw. Oh shit! Having been downwind of the blast, Sasha had seen their doom coming before anyone else realized what was truly happening. A bolt of lightning from on high split the heavens and roared into the trees, nearly ripping her from her perch. What came next was worse, the entire forest crashing down around her like a set of broken dominoes. Her body was already in flight by the time her mind realized what was happening, chakra and maneuver gear carrying her from the falling tree into safety. At least, she hoped it would. Connie was only a few steps behind, using every ounce of speed he'd garnered to outrun the blast. Not enough. He hadn't endured the sort of training she had. His strengths lay in other areas and agility was not one of them. Within moments he was lost in the storm of dust and falling trees. A sharp cry followed, and then nothing more. Sasha whimpered quietly and hastened her pace. She daren't look back for fear of what she might find there. She daren't open the gates again. She'd already made the mistake of using them to off a number of titans on the way here and now sorely regretted that decision. She wasn't going to make it. Bitter, angry tears gathered in her wide eyes and stubbornly, she fought them down. Already she could feel the storm gathering at her back, shattered trees and pines shredding through her cloak to rip at her back. It wouldn't be long now. For all her training, all her speed, she simply wasn't fast enough. The image of Connie's body dashed beneath a tree or worse, seized by an opportune titan, flashed through her mind and her heart quickened in her breast, raging like a frantic animal trying to escape its cage. To no avail. I'm going to die here. She had no possible avenue of escape and she knew it. She could only gather herself up and wait for the end. I should be stronger than this. Her blood boiled at the thought, burning red hot. I trained for this. That was when it happened. No, one moment she'd been watching a wave of death hurtle towards her, cursing herself for her powerlessness. The next she wasn't. Suddenly, her head was above the tree-lean trees that now looked like little toothpicks. And her maneuvering gear was all but gone. So were her clothes. What? 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 Sasha's eyes bulged madly, and her arms flailed wildly, seeking a handhold and an explanation where there was none to found at all. Her body was still flying forward, however, its momentum unimpeded, the once dangerous tree's little stinging bites against her legs. What the hell? Her hands found purchase at last in the soil, carving out deep furrows against the dirt, grinding her momentum to a painful halt. The mysterious explosion rolled over her massive, naked form in a wave of harmless dust. Her mind reeled as she coughed the last of the haze away, clamoring for some sort of an explanation. Somehow, in the span of only a few seconds, she'd gone from a girl of average size to this freak of nature. What was this? Just what the hell was this? Frantically, she struggled to preserve her modesty what little she could with her arms. Embarrassment lit her cheeks a frantic scarlet. What kind of jutsu was this? Was this even a jutsu? Would she even be able to return to normal size? Incredulous panic swamped her in a wave of hysteria. Oh no, she moaned quietly to herself, clutching at her chest. No. She wasn't a titan. She was still herself, only giant. Then Sasha saw the skinless specter rising up from the ruins of the forest, its back to her. No. Meanwhile, with Berthold, the blast that followed was nothing short of cataclysmic. It flattened the woods for miles in every direction, sparing neither man nor beast. Trees that had stood strong for decades, centuries, were uprooted as though they were no more than twigs. Those who weren't quick enough to escape found themselves flattened or worse, buried beneath massive logs that few mortal man could possibly hope to lift. Perhaps some escaped the blast, perhaps some did not. Berthold didn't care for their plight. Indeed, he barely even noticed. In the ensuing explosion, that vicious onslaught of steam and noise, he became distantly aware of Naruto and Jin's dismayed shouting, of the forest falling away against his shoulders, of the massive body taking shape around him. His titan took shape swiftly as it always did. Within moments the once mighty trees were little more than a distant memory, all broken branches and upturned soil beneath his pillar-like legs and feet. A part of him wondered if he'd squashed anyone, if the thunderous rise of his transformation had incidentally killed the very man who wanted him dead. Irritated, the colossal titan pushed such thoughts aside and returned his gaze to the destruction below. The wind reached him moments later. Good. Somehow, even from this height, he heard the words shouted up at him. I was hoping you'd give me a fight before I put you down. Slowly, Berthold turned his head. An intact portion of woodland told him exactly where the blonde lurked, and for a moment, just a moment, the titan was given pause. Somehow, he not only managed to shield himself from the blast, but those around him as well. Impressive. Most impressive. Not that it mattered now. With a speed that belied his bulk, the colossal raised a foot and drove it down with all his might. A haze of dust and broken wood answered, with no resistance. There. He'd squashed him like an ant, and now he'd deal with Annie. Whap! His attention was suddenly divided between the ant beneath his heel and the massive log now wedged in his left eye. Before he could even react to his sudden blindness, a large arm closed around his neck and hauled him backwards with ferocious strength. Infuriated, Berthold flared steam, venting massive waves of heat from his back. His attacker yelped in a sharp cry of pained surprise, but they still held tight, even as they were scalded. Driving a hard elbow behind him, he felt something soft and yielding. It took 3 such strikes before his attacker finally released him. At first he thought it another titan, but no, the face was all too human, those blazing brown orbs all too familiar. He knew that face, warped as it was by anger and rage. She was positively massive, topping out at nearly 40 meters, maybe more. Almost as tall as he. Her hair was a wild brown mess, making her look like a wild savage, not the kind, gentle girl he knew. Sasha? How in the hell? A spark of blue light lit itself under his foot. 7th gate. Open. Berthold looked down, froze. What? Said sparks swiftly bristled into an inferno. Confusion warred with incredulity as something stirred beneath his foot. Then, incredibly, that foot, followed by the rest of his leg, began to rise. Slowly at first, twitching in agonizing increments. Berthold balked at the sight. Startled, he pressed down with all his might and attempted to forcibly lower the limb, but whomever was pushing proved indomitable, and his leg continued to rise. No, that was impossible. No one, not even Naruto, should be able to lift him. What the hell was he? What was he? Just what the devil was he? Beneath the massive leg, Naruto slowly straightened to his full height, battered arms quivering with the sheer effort required to do so. Even with the 7th gate opened, it took nearly everything out of him merely to hold his ground in the face of such overwhelming might. His regeneration taxed to its maximum, struggling to repair the damage to his body, to alleviate the blistering burns suffered by the searing steam. But Naruto had never let limits stop him before, and he wasn't about to now. Come on, body. Hold together. Hold. Together, everything he was, everything he would ever be, condensed into a single moment. With a great heave, he tightened his hold, flung up his arms and exerted all his chakra at once in a single, savage shout. Aura! What happened next was nothing short of spectacular. Were anyone other than Jean present to witness it firsthand, they would claim it was nothing more than a controlled judo throw that toppled the large titan. Nothing too special. But the sheer force of this throw ripped Bertholdt's foot off at the ankle and launched the colossal titan away like a rag doll. Launched, for a sliver of eternity, and the most fleeting of instants the great Goliath seemed to hang adrift, suspended in the air as though hung from invisible strings. Then time unwound itself and gravity laid claim to its mighty prize. Jean exhaled sharply as he watched the colossal beast fall. How the hell? For the second time that day, Bertholdt reeled, railing wildly against his foe. How did he? I'm not done yet. A flash of blue in his peripherals was his only warning, and then Naruto was on him again, clutching a shrieking raisin shuriken in hand. His arm snapped forward and swept down, flinging the massive sphere into his right eye like a giant bomb. This time the pain was universal. Thousands of tiny chakra blades imploded against him all at once, ripping and tearing at him in a fierce explosion. Against any other titan, this would have been a certain death blow. But Bertholdt's sheer size saved him once more. Instead of losing his head, he merely went blind in that eye and sustained a loss of his face. The sheer size of his visage and thickness of skin kept his loss from being a sizable one. Nevertheless, the impact was a powerful one, snapping his head back and throwing him back down to the ground. A nasty crack echoed somewhere in the back of his neck, and unfortunate rider hadn't escaped in time and was crushed beneath his bulk, horse and all. Then he was down, blinded in that eye, howling in pain. He lay there for a long moment, stunned and greatly concerned. A few more of those might actually kill him. Move, damn it! Move! With great and agonizing slowness his body responded, painfully pulling itself into something resembling an upright position. The sheer weight of his titan body nearly defeated him then and there. But slowly, stubbornly the colossal titan scrapped itself off the plains and climbed back to its knees. Even then, the sundered state of his legs stood in stark defiance of his disbelief. How could this have happened? His strength was purely absolute, unquestionable in its might. And yet he had just been thrown. He'd been thrown, not only that but wounded, blinded in one eye and crippled. All by one man. His ruined leg was healing rapidly, of course, as was his eyes, but they would take time, a few seconds. Seconds that could be used to inflict a great deal of pain if he didn't hurry. But his body was moving slowly, far too slowly. For each second an eternity passed, an agonizing hell in which he could neither attack nor defend, only will his wounds to hasten their recovery as those precious moments were not wasted by the enemy. Naruto looked up, whistling softly. A Kimichi indeed. He'd been right on the money when he'd guessed she might have descended from Choji and his kin. Sasha, he cried up at her. I need you to. As sensei? Her head snapped down with such force he was certain it would fly off her shoulders. Her already large eyes grew wide, wider, then wider still. Naruto turned pale, recognized the ominous calm before the storm. Mistakes had been made. Many mistakes indeed. For a frozen instant nothing happened. Then the towering brunette colored from the roots of her hair to the very tips of her toes. Eek! In a flurry of motion she covered herself with both arms, flailing like a flustered schoolgirl. Don't look! She shrieked, her voice crashing like thunder. I'm not Lu, you are, eh? Her brow darkened thunderously. Pervert, Naruto swore. Now is not the Taiga. I said don't look, damn it. You wouldn't think someone so large could move with anything resembling speed. Not so for Sasha. Naruto nearly found himself stomped right then and there and likely would have been trampled entirely if not for his superior speed and reflexes. Had he had the sense, Bertholdt would have shed his titan form and fled right then and there. Instead, he found himself staring, stupefied by the strange scene unfolding before him. Oh, he knew he should force himself up and fight, but not only did his mangled foot refuse him this, but his mind simply refused to accept what was happening there. I'm not looking, all right? Naruto cried at last because he really hadn't, clamping a hand over his eyes for emphasis. Now pick me up. What? Sasha dithered, her wrath evaporating at the abrupt request. Just do it. 'Twas a strange sensation to be grabbed by someone so much larger than himself, but Naruto managed reasonably well as Sasha's massive fist closed around him. Her hand trembled nervously, afraid of crushing him to bloody bits, but no, she ferried him to her face easily enough. Her eyes told the rest. Sasha wasn't just nervous, she was absolutely terrified. And why shouldn't she be? She'd gone through so much in the last few minutes, more than she had any right to. God, Sasha. Words jumped out of Naruto before he could stop to think. He forced a laugh, touching her cheek. Look at you. You're huge, not helping. The poor girl looked to be on the edge of tears. Look, whatever happened, I swear I'll find a way to get you back to normal once this is done. Promise? She sniffed. Promise. He laid a swift peck on her nose nearly as large as him, and turned back to the still stunned Berthold. Now launch me at that fucker. As hard as you can. Then get out of here. He's mine. It wasn't pride that pushed him to face the colossal alone. It was fear. He couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone else to that monster. If that meant facing his traitorous student alone, then so be it. But, Sasha, her eyes brightened. All right. Sasha's massive form momentarily blotted out the sun, but her attack certainly didn't. In the time that it took Bert to realize what was happening, she'd already launched his tormentor at him like a ballistic missile. His only warning came in the form of a golden flash. The next thing he knew, something had latched right onto his skull. Deep within the colossal titan's nape, Berthold stiffened, growing tense with fear. A pair of blades bit deep into the flesh of his face and held fast, anchoring something there. No, not something. Someone. Surprise, motherfucker. Gah! Bert's remaining eye snapped upward just in time to find his assailant a great deal closer than before, clinging to his face. Once more, the wind carried his words to him. It did not, however, reveal what happened next. That was left for the shifter to witness firsthand with his ruined vision. Frantically he swatted at him with a giant hand, driving the battered blonde off his face and towards the ground. He'd soon wish he hadn't. Naruto didn't bite down on his hand or thumb as Berthold initially expected. Far from it, he did nothing of the sort. Instead he reached toward his stomach, the motion slow and deliberate, painstaking in its care. Fingers crooked into claws and made a sharp, pulling motion, tearing away the ruined fabric there. Sparks skittered across his fingertips, spreading rapidly to coalesce into a familiar scarlet-shaped one that planted a seed of raw dread in the colossal's heart. Even from his towering height, Berthold saw the flare of red light. And although he experienced it as little more than a tiny candle in the coming darkness, he saw it all the same and felt a pinprick of concern. Somehow, the colossal titan felt those eyes so much smaller than his own lock onto him and felt the challenge they carried. He willed his wounds to hasten in their healing. He even managed to repair his leg mere moments before the worst came. Then the ninja snarled. It was a deep, throaty sound that had no business belonging to a man. And on that snarl, a lone sentence carried once more with the winds. Your turn, Kurama. Then all hell broke loose. Abruptly the blonde seemed to swell up to meet Berthold all at once, changing all the while. His face, once human, pushed itself outward in the form of a bestial muzzle, teeth morphing into wicked fangs. Fingers curled and became paws as he sank onto all fours, his body swiftly sprouting scarlet fur. All the while his body stretched and grew, surging upward and outward, ever continued to gain muscle and mass beneath. Tails writhed into life, nearly tenfold in all, gouging the ground with might and power. And it was still growing, even larger than he'd remembered. Having seen this beast once before could not possibly prepare him for this. It was like watching a living calamity. The ground shook. Mountains trembled. The very sky itself darkened, clouds swarming in to smother the setting sun, strangling all light, any semblance of hope. He'd been expecting a titan. That was a smaller form, one he could handle. This was not a titan. Not in any way, shape or form did the beast before him identify as such a being, though he almost wished it had. He was looking at a nine-tailed fox. Unbidden, Berthold took a large step backward on his good foot. Kurama turned his muzzle and bared his fangs in a soul-chilling sneer. Where is your god now? Then the beast barreled into him with all the force of a falling star. Meanwhile, Annie woke with a crash and a start. What the hell? All the world shook around her in a mighty quake, bucking like a fierce, wild thing. Her arms shot out to steady herself on the ground. That was when she realized she wasn't alone. A pair of hands steadied her instead as she nearly fell back, latching onto her shoulders in an angry iron vice. She started, turned to slap the hand away and froze. A pair of burning blue eyes burned into her own, pinning her where she sat, branding her with their cold anger. Instinct quailed in the face of sheer despair, her face growing pale as she looked back at that unflinching face. Naruto. No, the clone's voice was flat like the ground itself. Not Naruto. An icy dagger of dread stabbed at her, dredging up the memory of what she'd done. Why she'd done it. How betrayed he must feel. Unbidden, another quake shook what remained of the wood. Now that she looked, she saw other bodies around her. Some were moving. Others not. Someone dabbed a cool cloth against her forehead. She thought it might be Petra, who else had hair like that, but she felt too numb to much care who was seeing to her wounds. Her concerns lay decidedly elsewhere. What's happening? She dared to venture. Boss is fixing your mistake. The doppelganger answered coldly. You should be grateful. A new voice interjected before she could finish. She's awake? The clone nodded. Once more Annie found herself the subject of scrutiny, much to her dismay. Erwin Smith was perhaps the last person in the world that she wanted to see at this moment. He clearly wasn't happy to see her, either. Disheveled, bloodied, and missing what looked to be a good portion of his right ear, the leader of the Scout Corps looked all of 3 seconds from flying off the handle. If the heat of his gaze and subtle twitch of his jaw were an indication, she'd best hold her tongue. Nevertheless, she returned it with a blaze of her own until the man. Explain yourself? There were casualties, of course. Erwin murmured. We'll have a full accounting when we get back. A heated silence followed. Where's Sasha? Both men exchanged a look. She reacted. Poorly to the incident. Poorly how? Well, the clone coughed. Remember way back when I mentioned she might be descended from the Akimichi? Yeah, turns out I was right. The blonde grimaced. Wah, now, Erwin interjected angrily, his words black. What are we going to do with you? Shame colored her visage a rosy red. I'm not your enemy. The clone eyed her callously. We'll see. Back with the Naruto, Kurama felt. Good, damned good. Really good? Fuck that. It felt fucking fantastic to stretch his legs again. Pause, whatever. Years of hibernating, of building up his strength, had all led to this moment. Freed from all restraints, all worries, all frustration, he was finally allowed to have his due. It was a glorious experience to have a body again, however temporary, to feel the fresh air against his fur, the earth beneath his paws, the taste of fresh blood in his jaws, the terrified squeaks of all the puny mortals beneath him as they quailed at his majesty and pure might just before he trod them underfoot. Ah well. Beggars couldn't be choosers. One fight was as good as any other. Speaking of which, Bertholdt scored a lucky sweep with a leg suddenly, driving a massive foot into the Biju's face. For what little good it did him. Kurama writhed upright, his tails thrashing the ground and uprooting a tree to fling at the giant's face, forcing a flinch. The fox barked a triumphant laugh and lunged after him, eyes gleaming, fangs flashing in the twilight. Don't wreck everything. Naruto's thought cracked at him like a whip. The kitsune snorted. Bah. Let me have my fun. He'd no interest in squashing the man's mates, at any rate. The man would never stop sulking. This was precisely why he'd driven the Titan out of the remains of the forest in the first place. Out here on the empty plains he only had to worry about the occasional Titan, and those were too small to inflict anything in the way of lasting harm. No, the only one truly capable of doing that was right in front of him. Whoa. A scalding burst of steam reminded Kurama of his present adversary, as the colossal tackled him into the ground. They went down in a heap, Titan and beast, clawing at one another. Fang met flesh and the latter yielded generously, copious amounts of blood spewing forth as he ripped into his adversary's upper chest. A searing hand closed around one of his many tails and tore it asunder. Kurama bounded away with a snarl, grimacing furiously at the pain in his mouth and spat the flesh out. Neck. He needed to get the neck, or barring that, blast the bastard to bits. Of course, that entailed knocking him down in the first place to make that shot count. He wasn't doing any damage like this. The Titan might be larger than him and bloody hot thanks to that steam. But he possessed the gift of speed, where this fool was little more than a lumbering brute. And he'd had years to learn their ways, their strengths and weaknesses. Take that armored one for example. That might have been messy. Or Annie even. In Kurama's experience, nimble targets were always, absolutely always the worst. Better to have a massive, slow-moving bear you could catch and tear apart rather than a nimble mouse you'd only exhaust your energy against. And what a bear this was. Bertholdt lunged at him and Kurama ducked a sweep that would have sheared his head clear off. He had no doubt that those hands could and would inflict serious damage should they ever get a hold of him. Not that they would if he had anything to say about it. Centuries of experience had made him cagey, wary of second mistakes. He wasn't about to come anywhere within reach of those massive limbs unless he knew he could writhe out from under them. Still, the Titan's flesh was soft, and he was slow. Compared to that one, this Bertholdt fellow was little more than a dumb brute. A large one, perhaps, but size wasn't everything. They clashed briefly, once, twice, thrice again, neither willing to fully commit to an attack that would otherwise end or save their lives. But Kurama was content to wait, and so was Naruto. Something this large was bound to make a mistake sooner or later. Gotcha. A single misstep of Bertholdt's, an instant of hesitation as he put his right foot forward, was all it took to end it for good. Kurama pounced forward, leaping as high as his legs would carry him. Bertholdt, clearly not expecting such a frontal assault, was caught wholly unprepared. Clawed paws dug into his massive chest, the sheer weight of the beast joined with his own and forced him down. Teeth closed around the Titan's shoulder even as he tried to thrash him off, gnashing, gnawing, ripping through boiling skin and muscle with savage fervor. An instant of searing blood and bone in his mouth and he was past, shearing the Goliath's right arm free in a spurt of red and black. Bertholdt roared furiously, the sound like a demon's howl, A rolling, piercing cry sure to attract titans for miles around, but by then it was already too late. Kurama crashing into him like an avalanche before his severed arm could regenerate, taking hold of the left and worrying it like a wolf at a bone. Weakened fingers reached up to grasp at his skull and he promptly bit them off, ignoring the burning agony of boiling blood in his gums. Berthold flared steam and struggled upright, jaw gaping in one final, desperate attack. Kurama/Naruto wasn't having it. Oh, no, you don't. A paw crushed down on his chest, pinning him to the ground as though he weighed no more than a feather. Those same paws flipped his body around, exposing the back of his neck. Sharpened fangs the size of houses clamped down on his jugular and yanked, ripping through steam and flesh to the soft body beneath. In the time that it took him to raise his massive arms, it was already too late. The beast had cut through to daylight. Dark eyes fluttered open almost against their will, just in time to see his doom dawning upon him, to feel the fetid breath of his foe hot upon his face. Massive jaws gaped open wide, exposing a large swell of light dancing at the back of the beast's throat. The shifter tried to free himself, but to no avail. He just couldn't struggle free fast enough. Any attempt to do so only tightened the trap. He could only stare helplessly, impotent, unable to move. That light, could light be black? How about those last words? The fox rumbled. Berthold knew it then, in that moment. Naruto probably saw it in his eyes, too. The fox was better, and he was going to die. Still the swirling sphere of death continued to build, burning brighter and brighter with each passing second of existence. There would be no surviving this. No regeneration, no lucky break, no Reiner or Annie come to save him at the last. He barely even had it in him to curse the blonde for besting him thus far, though his anger burned bright and fierce. Still, he gathered himself up enough to spit in his killer's face. Damn it! Berthold's last sight was that of the Baijidama hurtling towards his face at point-blank range, then, nothingness. And the tale continues. What will happen next? I apologize that I wasn't able to include the Annie Petra scene in this, but my muse demanded that this be a fight chapter, and she's a stubborn little thing when she wants to be. Romance and family will just have to wait until next chapter. I've expanded on that preview though, and another challenger appears? Find out next time in I'm Only Human, So. In the immortal words of Atlas, review. Would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Hope it makes you smile. There'll be 3 of them this time. Kudos to thee who get the TFS reference. Preview. What do you mean I can't turn back? Sasha whined. You said it would be easy, sensei. You promised. Hey, I never said that. It's just going to be difficult, hey. Don't cry. The brunette didn't stop bawling. Naruto winced at the crashing sound of his student's voice from his place on her knee. What little he knew of the Akimichi clan stemmed from what Choji had told him in the past, and it wasn't much as that. As it turned out, enlarging one's size wasn't all the difficult once you got the hang of it. Returning to normal size was the hard part. He regretted not listening to the specifics there. Seeing as there weren't any Akimichi around these days, or any other ninja beyond those he trained himself, the results were unpleasant to say the least. Sasha had been trapped in this massive body for the last 3 days now, and she'd been wholly miserable all the while. Cold, naked, and hungry. Does it help that I've always had a thing for tall chicks? He ventured lamely, hoping for a smile. He completely deserved the resultant stomp. Every bit of it. Naruto turned his head and spat out a tooth. You were saying, bub? Zeke swore. That's not fair at all. Sorry. No fucks given. Am I missing something here? Naruto looked this way and that, desperately searching for an escape, but to no avail. Annie had a firm hold of his right arm, and Petra his left. Try as he might, he couldn't bring himself to escape. It felt as if all his might had been drained away. The wrath of a woman was truly a terrifying thing indeed. Petra's bashful look put him ever so slightly at ease, but Annie's baleful glare only made him wriggle all the more. Fly. Fly, you fool. His mind clamored wildly for an exit, and finding none available, promptly shut down. Sorry, kid. You're on your own, traitor. Girls? Petra and Annie remained scarlet. I'm pregnant, you ass? Oh. You're just pregnant. A pause, as the realization sank in. The both of you. And there he goes. Kurama face-bombed. Naruto flared sage mode, saw it, promptly blew a smoke ring and toppled backwards. Mercifully, he was out cold by the time his skull struck the floor, and as such never felt the pain of his head kissing the stones, nor that of the latter's loud cry of denunciation. Annie remained none too pleased. Bastard's own fault for knocking her up, and he thought he could just pass out? Oh, there would be a reckoning for this. Hey, don't pass out. No response. A finger poked his cheek. Is he dead? Petra frowned. Annie colored madly. He'll wish he was as soon as he wakes up. Breaking the armor. Pain is a fascinating concept. It gives the body focus. Context: if you touch something hot, you would pull your hand away, would you not? If something sharp pricks your finger, you would do your best to avoid it, correct? If you consider someone to be dangerous, you do your best to avoid them. Precisely. Pain is imperative to recognize when you are in peril. To give the human mind. Context: without it, anyone would blunder headlong into danger with no regard for their own safety. Without pain, the body wouldn't be able to realize it was in danger. Yes, pain gives the body context. Reiner was beginning to believe he was contextually fucked. Not only did he have little to no legs to speak of at the moment, but he'd been disarmed at that, literally, torn apart, and divested of his maneuvering gear, left to inch along on the ground like a worm. He could only crawl. Even that required intense concentration on his part. Naruto had torn open his throat and hacked off all his limbs in brutal fashion, then thrown him to the ground for good measure, leaving him to be consumed by leaving him for the Titans to consume. No interrogation, no mercy, no quarter. By rights, he should have died from his wounds or been consumed hours ago. He was next to defenseless while he regenerated, his body struggling between his torn throat and the loss of his limbs. By some miracle he managed to survive and recover, just barely. With one arm and a half-healed throat that would likely leave him forever hoarse, he dragged himself through the muck. It was painfully slow going. The sun had long since set, and while theoretically he had nothing to fear of Titans in the dark, still the fear spurred him on. Time. He needed more time. He hadn't yet restored the rest of his limbs, and if he did happen upon a Titan or worse, a member of the Survey Corps, he'd have no recompense but to transform and risk alerting the entire world to his presence. Even after reclaiming some of his strength, that wasn't a gamble he was willing to take alone. All he could do was crawl. Berthold. Where was Berthold? The silence gave him all the answer he needed. He barely remembered the events that had transpired up until now, a side effect of throwing his consciousness into his nervous system at the last to survive. What he did recall proved decidedly murky. His memories of the torment that followed were foggy at best. But the body doesn't forget so easily. Even now the phantom pain of his once severed trachea haunted him with every inch. It remembered the biting cut that had cleaved his head nearly from nape to navel. The pain of losing his limbs still burned like a second sun in the back of his mind as he hauled himself across the cold ground. There had been an explosion of some sorts, what felt like hours ago, but he paid it no heed. His mind was consumed with the singular desire to get the hell out of here and everything else be damned before. Yo, funny how one word could inspire such terror. That single syllable that growled terrified the broken warrior more than any Titan ever could. He froze. There could be no other explanation for the way his body inexplicably ceased moving, such that his very heart skipped a single beat. At first he didn't dare turn. Yes, initially he refused to look over his shoulder, because he knew precisely what, rather, who, he would find waiting for him there. Already he could feel those eyes boring into his back, equal parts anger and disappointment again coupled with the sound of approaching footsteps. In the end, his body betrayed him and he found himself confirming his worst fear. For that fleeting instant, his heart truly stopped. His rescuer looked as though he just clawed his way out of the deepest, darkest pit. Though his face was covered in burns and his cloak lay tattered about his shoulders, though he'd soaked himself in the blood of his enemies and broken all but one of his blades, he somehow seemed even more fearsome than before. Reiner had once seen this man carve through a small army of Titans wearing that same, flat look as he wore now, a vague, disinterested expression. One that reflected no empathy, no remorse, just a cold, pitiless killer. A monster wearing the skin of a man. Angel to his allies, demon to his enemies. Not Berthold, not Naruto, Levi. An agonizing, jagged pall of silence fell over the night. Just where the hell do you think you're going? Shit. Reiner managed eloquently. A booted foot sailed between his ribs with sound and aplomb, catching the Titan shifter off guard and hurling him away into a nearby tree. Something cracked. Reiner soon realized it wasn't the bark. Pain blazed through his right side and he curled inward on himself without thinking, instinctively trying to shield his head, for all the good it did him. Scarce had he gathered his wits than a hand closed around a fistful of his hair and hoisted him upright, slamming him against the tree even as another forced his jaw shut. Unable to bite down and transform as well as lacking 3 of his limbs, he struggled impotently against the older man's grasp. Damn it! Before he could attempt an escape, however, Levi's blade found his neck, biting deep in the faint moonlight. You can't turn into a Titan while you're healing from all those injuries now, can you? The corporal's voice had always been flat to begin with, but now there was a distinct edge to it, one that cut deeper than any weapon possibly could. Stop squirming already. You're getting blood on my hands. There's about to be a lot more. Then, as if to add insult to injury, the very one responsible for leaving him in this sorry state dropped from the treetops. By contrast to Levi, Naruto had all but discarded his cloak and much of his clothing upon his upper torso alongside it. All that remained of his jacket was a single torn brown sleeve, while his trousers bore deep tears suggesting some lucky titan had tried to grab at him in passing. Pity they hadn't succeeded. For there was something dangerously unhinged in that smile of his. Those wicked orbs the color of crimson embers pierced him, slitted and scarlet. Someone who wore a mask of civility, but in moments such as these, he truly was staring at the devil himself. Hey now! The whiskered warrior warned, alighting on a nearby bough, then beside his partner. Don't kill him. We need him alive, remember? Levi's only audible response came in the form of a noncommittal grunt, but he did release Reiner all the same. Kraz, looking up into Naruto's face, the shifter almost wished he hadn't. Sup? Why the long face? His old mentor beamed, voice oozing with false sweetness. Aren't you happy to see me? Reiner most certainly was not. How in the hell was he still alive? Reiner. You, my boy, are one lucky son of a bitch. The older blonde drawled aloud, patting his cheek with a laugh. I didn't think you'd actually be able to survive after I cut you up like that. Yet here you are. Lucky me. That just means we get a second captive. Second, a pang of confusion followed, swiftly overridden by dismay. Bertholdt had been captured? His expression must have been truly telling, for his tormentor graced him with another eerie smile. Oh yes, his captor replied. He sang like a canary once I blasted him apart and ripped him out of his titan. Should have heard him scream. Remind you of anyone? No? Those dark eyes locked on him suddenly narrow and angry. His name was Marco. You killed him. Now I found out your little buddy got another student of mine killed today. Connie, that's right, he growled, seeing Reiner's painful flinch. He was caught in the blast when your idiot friend decided to transform. By the time we found him, it was already too late. Do you know what it's like to be crushed by a tree? Or several? What? No. That's not, I didn't intend to. A flash of gold was his only warning. Then came the pain. No. You didn't. Despite his best efforts, a strangled snarl escaped Reiner as he clutched at the bloody ruin where his right ear had been. Had he been possessed of his wits and his body not focused on restoring his limbs, he could have used the opportunity to transform. As it was, he could only snarl in pain and bare his teeth at his tormentor. Naruto scowled and his blade flicked out again, biting into Reiner's nose, divesting him of a chunk of flesh. He grit his jaw against the agony only for the sword to carve into him a third time. Arg. Naruto, for his part, didn't bat an eyelash. Would you look at that? The blonde growled. Even more blood on my hands, all because I was too blind to see you for what you truly were. So I apologize for. No, wait. I'm not sorry for this. At all. I'm going to eradicate you. He pushed forehead, slamming their foreheads together, words ground against Reiner's remaining ear like broken glass. No songs will be sung of you when we're done, no one will remember anything but your failure. You will cease to exist as this world curses your very name. And when your world falls, it will be all your fault. At that moment, the Jinchuriki turned his head. You can come out now. In his peripherals, Reiner glimpsed someone else, moving in the shadows, someone he hadn't noticed until this very moment. The faint light had concealed them. No longer. Mia? No, that wasn't it. Mina. Belatedly, her name finally came to Reiner as he beheld the cold anger burning behind her eyes, a tiny spark of hope dying, unsurprised. She trusted him, like all the others. Vouched for him. Believed in his innocence. Now she was looking at him as though he were a rotten carcass, not worthy of her time. No, it went beyond that. Something was wrong here. Something that went beyond the threat of his imminent demise. Beyond the ghastly looks everyone was giving him, and the obvious pain they seemed intent on inflicting. Terribly, horribly wrong. She looked at Reiner now, eyes brimming with angry, unshed tears, and he saw something in her die. Reiner, how could you? How could he? Naruto spat, a rare spark of anger slipping through his calm facade. Easily. He's a monster. Just like Bertholdt. These two don't care about us. They have no remorse for what they've done. Isn't that right, Reiner? Damn it, look in her eyes actually hurt. Mina, Thruck, you. Her hand cracked across his face in a vicious open-palmed slap before he could finish, sending him sprawling. Stunned, the shifter toppled backwards, a throbbing red handprint etched into his cheek. For their part, neither Levi nor Naruto did anything to stall her sudden assault. Even when she sprang after him, both men remained rooted, ignoring what followed. Had they been the blows of an ordinary civilian, Reiner would have surely been able to fend them off, even unarmed as he was. Still, the Black Cat continued to strike him a second time, then a third, a fourth. Fifth. In vain he raised his good arm to fend her off, but, As Mina painfully reminded him with each successive blow, she was anything but ordinary. She was every bit the shinobi Naruto had trained her to be in speed and power, and damn it, her blows stung. Only when she reached for a knife did Naruto intervene, restraining her arm and hauling her back. "It's all right," the blonde soothed. "Just breathe." Distraught, she tried to wrench herself free and lunge at Reiner again. "But I know. And he'll get his. But not like this. When he dies, it'll be slow." Reiner blanched. "No. You wouldn't." "Of course she can. Unlike you, Mina's actually a good person," came Naruto's flat reply as he took her gently by the shoulders. "She's like me. Willing to sacrifice so others might be spared. And let's be honest. Right now, she hates you just as much as I do. Maybe even more. She cared about Marco. Connie too, you know. Loved him like a big brother. I wouldn't force this on the others. But Mina, Mina." He gave the blackhead a light pat on the back, noting her smile. She volunteered. "So, shall we begin?" "Begin?" A pit of dread opened in Reiner's stomach, threatening to swallow all he knew. His mind offered a realization, and immediately, his mind shied away from it. "No, they wouldn't. Now then, Reiner," Naruto began briskly, his voice cold and biting like black ice. "It took us a bit of time and a bit of negotiating, but Levi and I finally came to an agreement on your punishment. We're going to give you exactly 10 seconds. Do whatever you like with them. Cry, beg for mercy, you can even try and transform if you like." Blue eyes rolled in feigned exasperation. "Who knows? You might even be able to get away from us. You may even get to kill me, if you're really lucky. But once those 10 seconds are up, you're not going to be happy." "That's right. Keep talking." Dragging himself into a somewhat upright position and silently willing his wounds to heal faster, the shift fixed his captors with a wary look. A stray glance confirmed he'd regained his other arm and was well on his way to recovering something resembling legs. He just needed a bit longer. Only a few moments more and maybe, just maybe, he'd be able to transform and turn the tables on his captor. His armor would be enough to protect him, surely. It wasn't as though they had anything to pierce it yet. What are you going to do?" "Impossibly." That cruel smile deepened. That's easy. I'm going to what I should have done the moment I realized you were a traitor." An arm rose ponderously from the folds of his dark cloak, revealing a wicked-looking syringe clenched in hand, containing an eerily familiar fluid. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "Judging by your expression, I'd say you do. Guess what I'm going to do with it." Despite the relative safety offered by the promise of transforming, Reiner recoiled from the thought. "No." Flailing, he struggled upright, only for a fist to slam home into his stomach, doubling him over. As it turned out, Naruto hit much harder than Mina, and the warrior felt something rattle in his chest. You know," Naruto ground out with painstaking slowness, pausing to grind a gloved fist against his fractured ribs, "I learned a secret or two during my time with Annie. More so when I snuck into the capital. Fascinating things. Not the answers I was looking for, mind you, but I think the ends outweigh the means. Why am I here? How was I able to become a Titan shifter? How do I return home?" Palming his face, the blonde slowly shook his head and fixed Reiner with another dark look. "I don't know. I still have plenty of questions, but..." His hand darted out, flashing the needle in his face. This was the highlight. "I liberated this fascinating serum off a certain man when he wasn't looking. Persad probably doesn't even know I took it from him. So," he finished, eyes burning, "guess what it does?" "No, I insist." "Guess." Reiner already knew. He dare not speak it aloud. "Stop playing with him and get it over with already," Levi warned, his flat voice cutting into the conversation. "I know he killed 2 of your kids, but this is getting out of hand. You're risking the mission just to satisfy your own grudge." Mina offered an incomprehensible noise, a sound caught somewhere between a snarl and hiss. "Out of hand?" Naruto's voice dropped an octave, vibrating with menace, frost in every syllable. "I think he's getting his just desserts. It's not enough to kill him." His fists ground together at his sides, drawing rivulets of blood. "He has to suffer and wish for death. He has to beg and whimper and cry just as Marco did. Oh, and now..." Levi's hand tightened around a blade. "Don't go losing your head over something like this." The ninja stiffened. Something like this. For a moment, Reiner thought the blonde would disregard his ally to attack then and there. He almost dared to hope the former would occur. Unfortunately, it came to the latter. "You're right." To Reiner's dismay, the blonde relented with a heavy sigh. "I'm sorry, Levi. I'll wrap this up." Then those cutting orbs found Reiner again. "Did you know that I can turn someone into a Titan with this?" Naruto elaborated happily as he turned his gaze back to Reiner, nearly manic in his glee. "That's right. An actual, mindless Titan. Now I know what you're thinking. What good would a Titan be? But if that Titan were to say, I don't know, devour a Titan shifter, well, he slammed another blow home between the ex-cadet's ribs, voice rising over the warrior's strangled grunts. I think you already know the gist of it. I never found a use for it, and in all honesty, I was reluctant to do so. Until now. Now. I'm not feeling nice. So, you should be happy, Reiner. It's not often I show mercy like this. Now, hurry up and choose. You have 10 seconds to fight, beg, or run for your fucking life. Number 9. For a fleeting instant, Reiner reeled. His body forced itself upright on legs not yet healed, scrambling backwards. All the while, the countdown continued. 8. It all made sense. 7. In a twisted logic, Naruto probably saw his action as the right. He had little to no knowledge of the Eldians and Marley, or even the conflict raging outside of Paradis Island. He knew nothing. But he would learn. As soon as Annie opened her mouth, everything would come crashing down. No, it had come apart even before that, from the first moment he and Naruto had crossed swords. It had begun the moment they'd laid eyes on each other all those years ago, and it should have ended there. Blasted sentiment. 6. Now, he was going to inject Mina with the serum and have her devour him. There would be no coming back from that. Only complete, utter oblivion. Worse, Mina would very likely inherit the power of the armored titan, and Marley would be none the wiser. That was another matter. Naruto knew entirely too much. Just what had Annie told him? Traitorous whore. Bitch. His thoughts turned ugly as they turned to his former comrade and her flagrant betrayal. She turned on her country, her family, all too easily, and for what? A bit of love and affection. Such a weakling. Didn't she understand the importance of their mission? It was so much more vital than such fleeting emotions like family, or love, or even. No. 5. Annie no longer cared. 4. Berthold had been captured. 3. He was staring death in the face. 2. In the end, there wasn't any choice at all. 1. He bit down on his hand, hard. Miraculously, Reiner found that he was in fact able to transform. Muscle and bone swelled around him as his titan form burst into existence with a crackle of thunder and light. Hardened armor rising around his joints, then locking down hard. Protected within the nape, even as the transformation finished, Reiner bellowed a roar and pivoted on his heel to slam a punch down at the trio of soldiers beneath his feet. He had no intention of putting himself at a disadvantage, he wanted only to scatter them. Buy himself time to escape, and figure out the rest later. In that effort, he was only partially successful. Levi and Mina were already zipping backwards in a puff of gas as the blow descended, seeking shelter in the high branches. His blow never found them. Not so for Naruto. Wrong choice. An echoing bolt of lightning answered Reiner, and in an instant, the armored titan found its assault stymied by the towering, six-armed terror that was Naruto's Azura Titan. Instead of rendering him a red stain on the ground, his fist crunched home into several tons of raging berserker, one who cared not a whit for him or his plans. In the next instant, his foe only answered with a crushing right hook of its own. Momentarily stunned, both stumbled back, their mangled faces already mending. Naruto bellowed a challenge and raised all of his hands into fists, taut muscle and flesh crystallizing even as Reiner looked on. Then he pounced. Damn it, Annie. Why did you teach him that? Snarling, Reiner dodged aside and threw a retaliatory blow, frantically trying to evade the shinobi's abrupt charge. A mistake that. Once Naruto realized his tackle wasn't going to connect, he opted for a more personal approach and dove at his legs, hardened teeth snapping at Reiner's heels, skidding sparks as they shot past. In that instant, he truly ceased to be Naruto in the warrior's mind. He was simply the Azura. A beast, no, a demon determined to grind his very soul to dust and stomp on the ashes. It was as if he'd ceased being human altogether. Shit. Within the nape of his titan, Reiner swore at the near miss. Gotta slow him down somehow. If he grabs me with those arms, it's over. The Azura Titan didn't even deign to receive the follow-up punch. He simply spun aside, abandoning his rush prematurely, flowing like water around Reiner's fist. Then he was upon him like a hurricane, that fang maw snarling in his face, flinging globs of spit upon his armored visage. Two of his 6 arms locked around Reiner's upper chest and neck, trapping it in a crushing armbar. The second pair found his arms, biting deep gouges into his forelimbs and forcing them to his sides. In that instant, Reiner had an epiphany. He experienced a moment of perfect, crystal clarity. He saw all of his choices, leading up to this moment, every mistake, and the precise moment where everything had gone awry. A beat of debilitating realization followed, time slowing to a crawl as his opponent pivoted, balance shifting, appending him. In the end, 2 words summed up his brief existence: I blundered. Then Naruto levered him down into the ground with bone-crushing force. In the chaos that followed, Reiner swiftly understood his peril. Not only was he wedged face down against the ground and trapped by his opponent's bulk, but the Azura had him by the arm at that. His armor may protect his body, but it did nothing to prevent the leverage of his trapped limb being utilized against him. Soon after, he found his left trapped in another lock, ripped backward with overwhelming strength. Flesh rent and plating creaked in painful protest against the forces extolling themselves upon him. Recognizing his plight, he lashed out and bit at the hands restraining him, but too late. Even now he could feel the armor on that limb cracking, splintering. Reaway-warg. With a blood-curdling bellow, Naruto ripped the arm away completely, shearing it off at the elbow in a grisly gout of gore and leaving it to flop away into the trees. Fueled by the pain, Reiner pushed up with his remaining limb and slammed his heavier body against Naruto's titan, slamming it aside. Wrenching himself upright, he struck out, exhaled a raging cloud of boiling steam, scalding steam into the Azura's face, and slammed his thick forehead against the beast's maw. A strangled snarl told him all he needed to know about the effectiveness of his attack. Another mistake. That only made the Azura angrier. The steam cleared then, and as one, those many arms descended on him in 1,000 blows. Ora. What followed was a one-sided beating, plain and simple. For all his armor and strength, it didn't matter. Countless piston blows rained down on Reiner as one, splintering more and more of his precious defenses, and with each passing moment escape became more and more unlikely. Unable to attack, he could only defend. He daren't break off any of his armor to try and flee for fear of Levi hamstringing him when he wasn't looking, and he knew even though that the rest of the soldiers were closing in on him. Fight or flight warred desperately within him, and neither option presented victory. Still the blows tore at his armor, causing it to fracture and crack, then buckle altogether as it became unable to withstand the pressure. Then came the finishing blow. Naruto growled darkly, the words warping through his titan's fanged maw. Reiner. Something in him quailed as those bloodthirsty eyes met his, brimming with raw malice. Come out and play. Then a burning fist barreled through his jaw and hammered home into the nape beyond. A slash and stay turned to see the outcome. Story's really starting to wrap up, folks. Find out next time. The tale continues. What will happen next? I apologize that I wasn't able to include the Annie Petra scene in this, but my muse demanded that this be a fight chapter, and she's a stubborn little thing when she wants to be. Romance and family will just have to wait until next chapter. I've expanded on that preview though, and another challenger appears? Find out next time in I'm Only Human, so. In the immortal words of Atlas, review. Would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Hope it makes you smile. And of course, a shocker. Preview. You throw rocks? What? Why are you smiling? Oh, nothing. That's just fucking adorable. You speak of love and bonds as if they're strength, compassion, power. Tell me, don't. What would happen if someone cut them? I will destroy everything. It's time to end it, Naruto. The whiskered warrior merely grinned. Strike me down, and I will become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. A ninja's legacy. Well, this wouldn't do. No, this wouldn't do at all. The beast titan observed the distant struggle from afar and felt something disturbingly close to anger. Yes, anger as it lumbered forwards, accidentally crushing a lesser titan under its foot. It had no way of knowing what was transpiring in the great forest beyond, only that he was displeased with it. Sensitive ears told enough. Trees toppled and soldiers perished, crushed like so many ants beneath the feet of giants. The roars of great beasts, broken and torn apart. In the end, the temptation had proven too great, impossible to resist, as had the thunderbolts that heralded the transformations that came with becoming a titan. It knew a battle was brewing, just as it knew this battle might well change the course of the war. His long walk had first begun when he'd glimpsed Annie running pell-mell after those soldiers. It continued when he beheld Berthold, towering over the trees as the colossal titan. Now it neared an end as Reiner's agonized roars pierced the night. This wasn't funny, not at all. He failed to understand how anyone could fail so utterly, and to be frank, it irked him. Now, any unfortunate or suicidal enough to encounter the ape, or those who served it, met with an even more gruesome fate. None were left to warn them of what was coming. The horde would descend without pause, without mercy. None would be spared. The village of Rigako had proved most useful in that regard for the beast titan. Most useful indeed. An army of titans marched at its back, one who crudely followed orders, but they'd serve their purpose in devouring any soldiers they encountered. One way or another, it was determined to make an end of things. He had only to wait for the right moment, and then strike. It cared not a whit for any of its enemies or its pawns, for its attention lay elsewhere. If you wanted something done right, you had to do it yourself. The beast titan, the one within it, realized this now. He'd been a fool to trust in those damn kids. Either they'd gotten too sentimental and shirked their duty, or they were simply too weak. Regardless, their failure was complete. He'd have to kill them and start all over again from scratch, no two ways about it. What a drag. It would take years to train up new warriors, even more to muster a sustainable force. His and Peek's term might well be up by then, which meant they'd have to entrust their will to others. In a sense, they'd also failed and might well be executed upon their return. But he'd be damned if he didn't gut the one responsible for all this. With that thought, the Beast Titan felt the bare beginnings of a smile form on its creased face. A very dark grin indeed. With each passing moment, that manic smirk deepened noticeably as it crept through the trees. He always tried to take enjoyment from life these days, after all. It helped distract him from the fate of these poor pitiful creatures, lacking any memory of the outside world, needlessly throwing themselves to their deaths. And what could be more enjoyable than ambushing an unwary enemy? Wait. It paused suddenly, considering, cocked its head to the east. The screams had stopped. That boded poorly. Honestly, it growled aloud into the dark. What do those brats think they're doing? I told them I wouldn't bail them out if they screwed up. What a pain. See, that attitude makes you an awful teacher. The Beast Titan paused in its ponderous pace, bright eyes snapping towards the voice. Nothing. Only the trees answered, silent giants in the dark offering neither response nor repose. A few irritating titans who'd drawn too close threatened to trip him up and soon found themselves slapped aside or snarled into silent, quavering submission. Thusly irritated, the towering behemoth cast its gaze back to the trees in search of the offender. Where had that blasted voice come from? Even with its keen eyesight, the Beast Titan found it somewhat difficult to discern its location. Aha, over here. Another soldier? Sure enough, he found its owner nearby, crouched upon a low-hanging bough. Clinging to the shadows well within arm's reach, their face sheltered by a tattered black cloak that looked to have seen better days. Pity. Were it not for the burning torch in their grasp, he might never have noticed them. Fool. Did they think this an ambush? What good could one soldier do by themselves? They didn't even have that fancy maneuvering gear worn by the rest of those ants. What did he intend to do with that little sword on his back? He'd sweat him long before he came within striking distance. Better to just have one of his minions devour him and be done with it. Still, he was rather curious. It wasn't often that a human had the nerve to challenge him head-on. Without that fascinating device, no less. Who the hell are you? That's unimportant. Still, please excuse the interruption. As he looked on, the puny human drew his blade with his free hand, sending sharpened steel gleaming in the torchlight. Sensei's fighting past here. I'm afraid I can't let you interfere. If you turn around right now, I promise to let you live. If not, well, is that so? The Beast Titan arched an eyebrow. Awfully noble of you. What can I say? I was raised to be polite. Now. Leave. That your final answer, boy? A tilted head answered. It is. Flicking a dismissive hand toward the interloper, the ape growled a command. You three. Kill him. To his disbelief, the challenger replied by stepping away the branch, forsaking the relative safety it afforded him by its height. For a fleeting moment he hung there, standing on empty air. Then he dropped like a sinking stone, plummeting toward the grasping hands with nary a sound. It drew a bark of laughter from the Beast Titan. Idiot. What kind of suicidal fool deliberately drew attention to himself, and then leaped to his death? Did he want to die? Ninja art hidden Miss Jutsu. As though summoned by those very words, a mysterious fog sprang up from the forest floor, flooding the Beast Titan's vision with a cloying curtain of mist. Thicker than any soup, the murky haze not only denied him a line of sight on the man, but somehow muffled his sense of smell. The mindless Titans paid it no heed, two-barreled headlong through the gloom without so much as a second thought, and were immediately cut down in recompense for their temerity, their towering bodies left to topple to the earth with a mighty crash of thunder. A third made the mistake of rush out over them, and its clumsy intentions slammed it to the ground in a writhing heap where it was swiftly dispatched as well. Another flicker in the fog and three more Titans collapsed, cut deeply in their napes. All this took place in less than an instant. TCH. Alright, you lot. Stop. Forced to take notice of the stranger at last, the Beast Titan turned, one hand protectively concealing the back of his own neck in case of ambush. With an effort he dropped into a low crouch, the sheer force of the wind caused by his movement blasting the fog back and causing the trees around them to shake like sticks in a gale. In short order, the intrepid hunter was revealed, bloody blade and all. If they felt any fear at this sudden proximity, they did precious little to show it, only raising a hand to hold onto their hood and prevent it being blown backwards by the blast. Not bad. He relented, baring his fangs in a smile. What kind of trick was that? Eerie eyes the color of poisoned honey gleamed up at him beneath the shadows of the cowl. There was something decidedly wrong with those orbs. The pupils were all wrong somehow, slanted and horizontal, bearing a strange amber-colored pigment at the edges. Eyes that stared right through him, as though he weren't even there. Perhaps sensing his disquiet, the stranger grinned back from the shadow of their cowl, flashing perfect white teeth. No tricks here? Now that he was close enough, the Beast Titan immediately discerned there was something wrong with the man's voice, as well. It emerged hoarse and rough, barely able to be raised above a whisper, as though they couldn't quite draw enough air through their lungs. I was trained by the best. Now, are you going to hide inside that Titan all night? His sword rose, gleaming with blood. Or do I have to carve you out of there? Zeke-san? Zeke froze. He knew. The Beast Titan's hand thundered down on the man's head without thought or warning. There was no sense behind the blow, only anger. Only the desire to destroy him on the spot, and his knowledge with him. Imagine his surprise when that very same hand found itself caught by the challenger. Reversed, as though the first of an angry god had risen up from the very earth to strike him, so too did he find himself flung backward with a vengeance, slamming down on one of the titans he'd commandeered. Poor Saad was crushed instantly. Zeke no longer cared. Indignant, he fought to right himself, unable to understand what had happened, because the little shit knew. He didn't understand how, only that he did. Only a handful of people should know that name, and this thing was not one of them. Even as he fought to return to his crouched position, a titan surged forward, ignoring his command to remain still. Blindly, it lunged at the young man at Zeke's feet, not once considering the danger. Mistake. A crackle like 1,000 chirping birds swelled. Still, this was proving to be more diverting than he'd expected. Sorry. The stranger's voice sang. Senjutsu's pretty potent. I still don't know my own strength. Levering his bulky body upright, the Titan shifter fought the urge to lash out again. Instead, he forced himself to assess the situation. Interesting. So he had students after all. The Beast Titan took a moment to ponder that, thumbing its chin. It had heard tell of someone within the walls who possessed strange powers. Supposedly he'd gifted several people with the same power. He merely assumed it to be just that. Rumors. Whispers birthed by a fearful populace clinging to hope against the inevitable. But what he'd just seen told a very different story. If what the brat said was true, he had much more to worry about than simply reclaiming the power of the female, armored, and colossal titans. How very interesting indeed. I admit I've been watching you for some time now. The stranger confessed, rolling his right shoulder. You and your allies. Learning your name was easy. Discovering the truth down in that basement. Not so much. Eldians? Marley? I don't give a damn about them, or what that means for us. If ignorance serves this world better, then so be it. I'm a shinobi. I have a duty, an oath, to the man who saved me. If that means working in the shadows, standing in your way, then I'll bear that burden with pride. I don't even have to kill you to see his dream fulfilled. Impossibly, that unhinged smile deepened. I just have to stall you. Restraining himself with an effort, Zeke scowled down at the impudent interloper. Noble words. Noble? The stranger cocked their head, incredulous. Nothing noble about the truth. What Naruto's doing? That's noble. He's willing to fight and die with all the world's hatred on his shoulders if he has to. That's what a hero does. He sacrifices for the greater good, regardless if it means throwing away his humanity, even if it means being called a villain like you. However, don't think I'm going to let you have your way. See this sword here, monkey boy? Come at me. I'm gonna ram it right up your ass and bugger you with it. Zeke scowled at the sudden turn in language. How vulgar. He leaned forward to capture the stranger's attention, and in doing so, concealing his right hand from view. He was very certain the young man didn't see him scoop up a bit of shattered stone from the ruined road. Least of all him curling it into his fist. He'd already provoked him once before, now he just had to force him into making one last mistake. Don't worry. I'll be sure to discipline your teacher and my subordinates when I'm through with you. Subordinates? In a rare fit of pique, the hooded youth turned their head aside and spat, partially exposing his face. You have no right to call them that. You're no leader. You'd throw them to the grinder if it suited your whims. They're terrified of you. His good hand tightened viciously around the hilt of his blade, white knuckles straining immeasurably. Because of you, Annie? Annie. Ah, and there it was. A weakness in that seemingly impenetrable facade of his. Something to be exploited. Ho? You know Annie? Stupid child. All bite and no bark. What did he know of the world? I did. When that steely gaze found his again, Zeke found himself chilled by it. I know Reiner too. And Berholt. At least I did. I see their face in my dreams. Those two are monsters. Just like you. Not Annie. She's a good girl. Wouldn't hurt a fly if she didn't have to. Yet you and others would force her to. Something had crystallized in that flinty stare there, something cold and dark that threatened to swallow him whole if he stared overlong at it. This was the face of a man who'd seen death and come out the other side. Changed. Is that not what a leader does? The beast titan chuffed, feigning bemusement by the young man's anger to hide his own anxiety. Sacrifices are sometimes necessary to achieve one's goal. Bullshit. A leader, a teacher, defends his followers to the last breath, then die for them. A wall of writhing roots erupted from the earth in the same instant that Zeke let the stone fly, and only one yielded. Concealed in his offhand, Zeke had waited for that pivotal moment when his prey was most angered and let his missile fly. He'd hurled it at full speed, point blank. No chance to counterattack, much less dodge. By rights he should be a red smear on the ground. The clearing dust suggested a different outcome altogether. A sharp, short bark of laughter merely confirmed it. The haze cleared to reveal his flung boulder had been neatly deposited in a nearby titan's skull. Of the young man, he saw nothing, standing amidst the shifting roots. His scornful smile told all. I'm sorry. What was that supposed to be? Because that was just fucking adorable. What? Are you mocking me? No, a hand waved. Not at all. Feel free to try again. Who are you? It repeated. I won't ask again. After a moment of silence, they tugged back their hood. A dead man. Immediately, Zeke found himself presented with a ghastly visage. They, whomever they were, had clearly suffered through a very, very bad day at some point in their life. Half of their face stood out in a latticework of angry red scars over a curtain of overgrown black hair, a veritable web of red and pink cutting across their profile in grisly red relief, some of it scarred over in places, trailing down his neck to expose what he could only assume to be excessively pale skin. Furthermore, they seemed to favor their right side, suggesting a grievous wound that hadn't yet healed properly. Despite this, or perhaps in spite of it, they still retained full functionality of both eyes, tainted though they were. Their pale gaze followed the beast titan as he shifted on his haunches, rearing back in disgust. Well now, ugly, isn't it? The young man laughed lightly, palming his disfigured visage. If they saw me like this, I'd never live it down. Well, I'm still alive somehow, so I suppose I can't complain too much. Raising his blade, the marked man planted it firmly in the ground blade first, and shifted his still-burning torch to his opposite hand. Its waning firelight seemed to waver and writhe as he held it close, sending warped shadows dancing across his face as he spoke. You wanted to know my name, correct? It doesn't hold much meaning to me now. He paused a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. You know, I wasn't lying when I called myself a dead man. I have perished and been reborn anew. Better than before. Stronger. As you're about to learn. You want to fight me, little man? Golden eyes narrowed to slits. Little man? My name is Marco. And fight you? No. I want to kill you. Tell me, does your fur burn? Well, I haven't exactly tested that, but the ape titan didn't expect Marco to hurl the torch in his face. Certainly not the hellish inferno that followed. Fire-style great fire annihilation. Meanwhile, with our heroes, Eren was the first to witness the explosion that followed. It was a very nice explosion, he thought, full of sound and fury and fire. Loads of fire. Chakra as well. As if someone had lit a match beneath a vat of grease, so too did he watch a quarter of the forest go up in a sea of red flames. The shockwave that followed ripped through the trees like a great and angry wind, nearly tearing him and his colleagues from the branches. Some were caught unawares and flung away into the air. Others found themselves more fortunate and anchored themselves with their ODM gear, still others, with chakra. A wordless roar tore over them and it was done, leaving the survivors reeling, struggling to understand the enormity of what had just transpired. Oh! Amber balked from her perch beside him. Wasn't that overkill? Eren found himself in close agreement there. Seeing the blaze, he was actually grateful they'd been placed on standby. Several of the trees were now beginning to burn, and it seemed increasingly likely that the forest would not last the night, if Armin was right. Not that forest was in exceedingly good shape these days, thanks to a certain Titan's rampage. Frowning at the reminder, he flicked a dark look at Berholt's limbless form, under stern guard by Annie. Her bright blue eyes were cold as ice, never once leaving the blinded warrior's face. As he looked on, she knelt, drew a knife and set to work severing another slow-healing limb before it could mend. Muffled shrieks forced their way past the young man's gag, but his cries went unheard by her hardened heart. Eren's as well. For him, every cry was music to his ears. Justice. Bertholdt wasn't going to perish any time soon. On the contrary, he wasn't going to die for a very long time. Unlike Annie, a shifter, of all people, who would have thought? A pair of Naruto's doppelgangers had arrived in a flash to deposit them at Erwin's feet, one lingering just long enough to explain the situation before vanishing into the night with Mina and Levi. The other had remained behind to deal with Sasha's situation, which didn't look as though it would be resolved anytime soon. For better or worse, Annie had also made her choice, opting to surrender to the Survey Corps rather than side with her fellow warriors. Unlike Reiner. Merely thinking about that threatened to set him reeling all over again. The truth was out now, and all he knew had been turned on its head forevermore. Bertholdt was the colossal titan, Reiner, the armored titan. It made his blood boil. Those damn traitors. He longed to interrogate Naruto about this, to demand answers from his mentor. No more secrets. No more lies. Sadly, it didn't seem that he'd be getting those answers anytime soon. He wasn't sure how to feel towards Annie. In one vein, her saw her as a comrade, one who taught him the basics of how to fight. On the other, she was a fellow shifter, one who, unlike Aimer, held loyalty only to Naruto and no other. Did that make her an ally? An enemy? He wasn't sure. If Mikasa was willing to vouch for her, that made her the former, right? She couldn't possibly be an enemy, right? What? What do you mean I can't turn back? You said it would be easy, sensei. You promised. Sasha's thundering voice reminded him of another problem at hand. Although Eren could hear Sasha, he couldn't properly see the towering brunette in the darkness per se, and for that, he was immensely grateful. Already he could feel Mikasa's gaze boring a hole in his back and daren't look up because of it. Even he wasn't that foolish. Several soldiers were already studiously averting their gaze for the sake of the poor girl's modesty. The trees preserved precious little of her as it was, and it was for her sake as much as Naruto's that they hadn't yet abandoned the forest and retreated to the safety of the walls. A Kimichi blood indeed. Oh, fuck my life. Across the way, Naruto's clone uttered a long-suffering sigh and with an effort, painstakingly uncorked his still-ringing ears. One might think after defeating the colossal titan, his work would be over. Far from it. Even now he looked to be at his wit's end, a man torn between too many goals with not enough time to accommodate them. Although this one was a copy and could be dispelled by a single blow, it was easy to forget that it was still Naruto, and had every bit his wit and temper, especially the temper. Hey, I never said that, it's just going to be difficult, hey. Don't cry. The brunette didn't stop bawling. Naruto winced at the crashing sound of his student's voice from his place on her knee. What little he knew of the Akimichi clan stemmed from what Choji had told him in the past, and it wasn't much as that. As it turned out, enlarging one's size wasn't all the difficult once you got the hang of it. Returning to normal size was the hard part. He regretted not listening to the specifics there. Seeing as there weren't any Akimichi around these days, or any other ninja beyond those he trained himself, the results were unpleasant to say the least. Sasha had been trapped in this massive body for the last few hours now, and she'd been wholly miserable all the while. Cold, naked, and hungry. Does it help that I've always had a thing for tall chicks? He ventured lamely, hoping for a smile. He completely deserved the resultant stomp. Every bit of it. Eren couldn't help but shake his head. Good thing that isn't the real one, Eren. A sharp tug on his sleeve reminded Jaeger of where he was and set him to sweating buckets. I wasn't looking. Mikasa's stoic gaze put paid to that. Look. Following her direction, he realized with a start that those once distant flames were beginning to spread. Close. Very close indeed. Well, that's not good. Deeper within the forest. There's a first time for everything. In all his years of service with the Survey Corps, Levi Ackerman had seen some serious shit. He had participated in suicidal charges and survived. He'd cut his way through hordes of enemies and lived where others fell. Watched dear friends be devoured by titans, carved said titans into bloody red chunks in return. Seen the ridicule and fear in the faces of those he'd called his allies after doing so. Some saw him as ruthless, thinking his lack of on the contrary. He knew what it was to be feared and what it meant to instill that fear in others. Sometimes fear was all that kept you going. Watching Naruto tear Reiner apart, he felt that same fear brush against him for the first time in his life. He saw Mina, too, her wide expressive eyes turned glassy by the violence unfolding before them. It was disturbing, to say the least. Gone wholly berserk, Azura Titan gave the armored Titan neither pause nor quarter. It laid into him as though its sole intent were to devour him whole. Whatever Naruto could not shatter with his hands he either ripped away or ground to a pulp. What he could not crush he simply beat into oblivion, hammering away at Reiner's defenses without the meanest care for his own well-being. Tooth and nail and claw, he savaged him until, as all are wont to do, Reiner's Titan collapsed under the strain. There was nothing remotely human or humane about his actions, intelligent though they'd seemed. He'd become a beast acting solely on instinct. Despite this, Levi didn't feel the slightest iota of pity for the traitor. Reiner had sealed his fate long ago, long before he'd chosen to stand his ground and fight. At last, the hunter had become the prey. Then came the decisive blow. Reiner. Come out. Never had he witnessed someone physically punch a Titan shifter out of their Titan before. Nope. Not once. And why should he? Only hours ago, Eren and Naruto had been the only known shifters, with Annie claiming a very close third. Oh, it stood to reason that there might have been others in hiding, but such an absurd idea had never occurred to him until now. It had seemed a silly thing to fantasize about, no matter how spectacular it might seem. Now Naruto did just that, cannonading a clenched fist through the armored titan's crumbling throat and the nape beyond. Caught unawares by the explosive attack, Reiner was helpless to escape. His body found itself violently ejected into the air, twirling end over end like a falling leaf, one that might be blown away on the winds at any moment. Thud! Said leaf swiftly found its hopes dashed against the ground as a massive fist descended upon it with a painful crunch. Anyone else would have been obliterated on the spot. Not Reiner. Not only did he suffer the misfortune of surviving the blow, but he remained painfully conscious for what came next. Naruto was already ripping himself free from his own titan, one monster clawing its way out of another. Even from here Levi could see the hate burning in those cerulean/vermilion eyes of his, a myriad of sapphire and scarlet, ever shifting, never static. Seeing this, Mina shrank back with a whimper. If Naruto noticed her fear, he didn't care. I'm coming for you, Reiner. The words were a skeletal hiss as he extricated himself from his titan, bare and arid in their intensity. Do you hear me? I'm going to tear you apart. Reiner groaned and tried to drag himself away, to no avail. Stay away from me. Don't come any closer. That was as good as an invitation. Feverishly tearing away the last fleshy tether from his titan, the whiskered warrior freed himself and dropped to the shattered earth, landing not a hair's breadth away from his fellow shifter. Seeing this, Reiner hissed out a breath, immediately intensified his efforts to crawl away. Unfortunately, this only served to further enrage the berserk blonde bearing down on him. His hand closed around a bit of broken armor from his titan and swiped upwards, his impromptu blade finding flesh in the same instant that Naruto tackled him to the ground, spattering the earth with blood. A brief scuffle ensued between both men, with the latter soon gaining the upper hand. No, you fucking don't? He growled, baring his fangs. You don't get to run. A hand locked around his throat. Monster. Naruto retaliated by biting the weakened wrist clear off, hand and all. Sharp teeth, Levi mused. Monster, you know? Naruto was shouting now, voice emerging as a smoky growl over Reiner's screams, red spittle flying in his face. With due cause, even from here he could see the shinobi's throat mending rapidly. Does a monster feel guilt? Does a monster sacrifice himself for the world? Hauling him forward, he slammed his forehead against his opponent, stunning him. Does a monster throw himself in harm's way so that others might be spared? Does a monster commit unspeakable acts so that others will never be forced to undertake them? No. I am not a monster, you stupid little shit. I'm only human. But I am your end. With a growl, he flung Reiner down and set a blade to his head. Suffer me now. He roared in a voice like rolling thunder. No more smug words? No threats? No more insults? Well, for a fleeting instant, Levi thought the blonde was going to forego their deal and simply end him then and there. He certainly looked like it. Incredibly, he abstained. Get the serum ready. Mina inched forward with slow, hesitant steps, clutching the syringe in both hands. Ready? The blackhead dithered. Whatever wrath she must have held for Reiner, whatever resolve she'd mustered before, it seemed to have withered somewhat, for she trembled like a leaf beneath their gaze. Naruto must have seen it too, for his expression softened. Levi didn't blame him. This task was beyond important, a monumental undertaking not for the faint of heart. She was about to undertake an experiment that had no guaranteed chance of success. If it failed somehow, then she'd be trapped as a mindless titan for the rest of existence, doomed to wander in eternal hunger. Of course she'd be nervous. Anyone in their right mind would be. Hey! Hold him, will ya? Naruto pleaded of Levi, imploringly. With an annoyed grunt, the veteran soldier complied. Fine. Don't blame me if he loses a few pieces. Have a field day. Momentarily freed from his obligations, Naruto moved to comfort his ally the only way he knew how. Shuffling forward against the pain of his fractured ankle, he took Mina aside. She allowed him to lead her away, true enough, but the dark thunderclouds on her brow didn't diminish. Hey! He ventured. I'm sorry you had to see that side of me. That's all right. She murmured weakly, looking away. Damn it! Naruto frowned and took hold of her by the shoulders, forcibly spinning the smaller girl around to face him. No, he declared. No, it isn't. I lost control, and I regret it. Come on, talk to me. After all, Reiner, slap. With his guard lowered, he never saw the blow until Mina actually struck him. In any event, it served as a stern reminder. No matter her appearance, Mina was still very much a shinobi. And every bit the one he trained her to be at that. Her hand slammed into his face with sound and force, physically spinning the blonde around and depositing him on his rear. He sat there for a moment, incredulous. Then a spark of anger ignited deep in his chest, and he bolted to his feet, eyes burning. What the hell? The man who taught me isn't a monster, Minra replied frankly, meeting his smoldering gaze with one of her own. So, don't act like one. I can't bear seeing you like that. All right? Her words cut him deeper than any blade, and he looked away, unable to bear her gaze. Geez, when did you get so damn feisty? Sometimes he forgot how fragile the people of this world were. He'd been trained for combat all his life, but that had been against actual people. Shinobi. Kunoichi. Ninja. It was so much easier than waging war against giant monsters that wanted nothing more than to devour you, than becoming one for the sake of duty. Levi and the veterans in the Survey Corps were already hardened to such things, of course, he knew that. But for Mina, perhaps he'd asked too much of her after all. This was a serious undertaking, and though she'd volunteered for it, she only now seemed to consider the consequences. And yet here she was, telling him not to be so foolish as to lose sight of himself. What if indeed? What if something happened? What if something went wrong? All right. I get ya. Picking himself up off the floor, the whiskered warrior thumbed a thin line of blood away from his cheek and stood. You don't have to do this, you know. We can find someone else. A blaze of orange to the far east claimed his attention briefly, but he resolved to ignore the distant fire in favor of his distressed student. Do you want me to take the needle away? Mina was silent for a very long time, her face contracting in veiled anguish. Did she want him to take it? Give someone else this burden? It would be easy, so terribly easy. On some level, the idea of becoming a titan, however briefly, terrified her more than words could describe. She'd nearly been devoured by one after all. That was a memory not so easily forgotten, and one she still lost sleep over when she spent her nights alone. The idea of losing herself, the risk of being trapped as one of those beasts, was it worth the risk? Part of her craved vengeance for Marco and Connie. Until now, the desire for that revenge had been more than enough. Yet here, now, at the last, she found herself hesitant. Supposedly by doing this she risked losing something far more precious. Her memories. Some might call it a risk to do so, others would call it necessary, yet to devour Reiner. At length she spoke. Armin once told me something, she replied quietly, staring stoically at the silent syringe in her hands. Any human willing to change the world has to be able to abandon something important to them. Anyone pushed to the point of having to stave off monsters must in turn be able to abandon their humanity. People cannot change anything unless they are able to throw things away. She felt Naruto's eye on her all the while as she spoke, ready to swoop in at a moment's notice and relieve her of this burden if she so chose. How sweet of him. In the end, however, she made the conscious decision to grip the needle tight. Behind her, the blonde arched an eyebrow. That boy's damn clever. So are you, when you want to be, Mina reminded him. He sniggered, and just like that, the tension shattered. Me, a genius? That's rich. All I know how to do is fight, and love, she reminded him gently. That's why. Mina? He started a bit when she looked at him now, eyes gleaming with unshed tears. I love you. You know that, right? Naruto's smile vanished, fading into confused concern. Her face grew hot and betrayed her immediately as she realized the gravity of her words, but resolved to move onward before she lost her nerve. That is. I just wanted to say it. Flustered, she jerked her hand out of his and curled it against her chest in a trembling salute. In case this doesn't work. Well. Thank you, for everything. Even if this affects my memories, I'll never forget you. Ever. Right then. Now or never. She would be a coward no longer, and she would do her duty. With a sharp intake of breath, she braced herself for the worst. Here goes. A snake of unspoken dread coiled in Naruto's gut as her arm swung up. Now wait just a. Mina responded by slamming the needle home in her arm and injecting the fluid. The change was immediate. It hurt. It hurt. A terrible scream tore its way free from her throat as all sense and the world fell away, muscle and bone riding into existence around her. Aowarg. The explosion that followed ripped Naruto from his feet and cast him into the air. Slamming into a tree, he hissed out a breath and got his legs under him, gluing himself to the side of the mighty oak thanks to a judicious application of chakra. He remained standing only through sheer force of will, staring into the raging storm that had engulfed his student. He was only distantly aware of Levi landing beside him as he watched Mina's titan rapidly take shape, a towering 20-meter behemoth that easily aped anything he'd seen before, barring the colossal titan itself. The brat really did it, Levi exclaimed. It would seem that she had, Naruto mused, watching Mina's titaniized body stumble upright. Its wide, expressive eyes reminded him of her instantly, as did her hair, now a curtain of ebony framing her overly large face in disturbing relief. Shifting restlessly on long legs, she turned her face upward and gazed intently at the two men on the tree with blank eyes. Slowly, she shuffled forwards, the ground quaking with every step. Thanks to her newfound height, they were well within her reach. A massive hand rose ponderously towards them, its intentions painfully clear. Levi swore, retreating to the upper branches. Shit. Well, Naruto decided, that just about summarized things. Thankfully, he had prepared for such an eventuality. Inhaling sharply, he needed chakra in his lungs, gathered up all of his strength, sucking in a deep breath. Then he roared. No. The resultant shockwave didn't so much hurt Mina as it did stun her. A veritable wave of chakra-enhanced sound slamming her down to the forest floor in a single, crushing command. Doubtlessly such a loud roar would draw titans from miles around, but at the moment, this was the least of his concerns. He just needed to break through to the girl inside the titan, to stir her memory, if only for a moment. If she could just remember why she had become a titan in the first place, and devour the possessor of the armored titan, then, not us, Mina? He shouted again in that deep, resonating voice, thrusting his hand forward. Reiner. Eat Reiner. Rubbing his ringing ears, Levi shot him a dark look. What the hell was that for? Naruto flung up an arm. Wait. Slowly, painstakingly, the titan that was Mina turned its gaze southward, following the direction he'd indicated. Toward Reiner. She turned her head, looking back at them. Reiner. Back to Reiner. Slowly, she smiled. It was not a pleasant thing, that smile. The scream that followed certainly didn't belong to Mina. Dropping to all fours, the massive titan uttered a heart-stopping hiss and pounced at Reiner, clearing the distance between her and the shifter in an instant. A hand slammed down on his struggling form before he could try and tumble away, trapping him against the ground and gouging great chunks of earth free from the soil in her overzealous attempt to capture him. In an instant, she had him trapped in her fist. A moment later, and he was ascending, rising toward her gaping maw. He flailed frantically at her, to no avail. His blows bounced harmlessly off her hands and full would be her mouth, then teeth as she relentlessly forced him upward. Stop. Distant words reached her ears, as though spoken from a great distance. Please. I surrender. Had she been human, she would have perhaps felt some guilt for her actions. In his final moments, she never heard Reiner's shrill pleas for mercy. Clamping down hard on his head, she tasted blood, and her world changed forever. Mina gasped. It was the very first rational thought her brain allowed in what felt like a very long time. Her lungs burned with 1,000 fires, feeling as if they hadn't drawn breath in an age. Who was she? Where was she? What had happened? She choked out a breath again and found herself adrift in darkness, as though someone had snuffed out all the light in the world. Even gravity had abandoned her, leaving her alone in the void, naked as the day she'd been born. So distracted was she, that she didn't even think to preserve her own modesty. Who am I? Even that simple memory eluded her as she lay there. Black hair hung around her head like a dark halo, partially obscuring her vision. Let go. The low rumbling voice startled her so badly that she flailed upright, thrashing at nothing. Who's there? Let go. A spark of anger enabled her to right herself completely in the abyss, but did nothing to warm the chill in her bones. The darkness seemed to press in on her now, anxious to snuff her out. With every fiber of her being she resisted, not knowing why but only that she mustn't give in. Where am I? Let go of everything. Still the voice droned at her, urging her to let go. To give in. Let go of what, exactly? Give in to who? She felt as though she were forgetting something horribly important, but her mind refused to recall this. Like a word unspoken, dangling at the tip of her tongue. Stubbornly, she clawed at it, trying to remember. So close. Just out of reach. Let go. No. The refusal to relinquish her sense of self brought with it something she'd forgotten. A name. Mina. Her name was Mina. She was a ninja, shinobi. Logic and sense proved themselves slow to return indeed, but once they did she almost found herself wishing she hadn't. Memories, both hers and not entirely her own, danced in her mind, sizzling down her synapses as sparks would a fire. She beheld a distant island, a towering wall, saw her friend devoured by a titan. Charged headlong through a wall. Had she done that? She didn't recall. Everything proved fuzzy, her own life mired in images she didn't recognize, scenes of a city she'd never seen before, faces she didn't recognize, names and places she'd never known. Eldia? Marley? No. These weren't her thoughts. She clawed at her skull to no avail. In spite of her efforts, it all flooded her without remorse. Let go of everything. Wait, that's not. I didn't. Let go. Ah, these must be Reiner's memories. Let go of everything. But there was more now. 1,000 scenes danced before her eyes, past, present, and future. You speak of love and bonds as if their strength, compassion, power. Tell me, don't. What would happen if someone cut them? I will destroy everything. It's time to end it, Naruto. Strike me down, and I will become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. Mina, a thin shaft of light burst through the darkness abruptly, and from that darkness a hand reached for her. Naruto? She knew that arm. She recognized the circular mark upon its palm, the scars etched into the forearm. She traced them countless times with her fingers, memorized every inch of it, and its owner. The voice, his face, merely confirmed her suspicions. A spark of remembrance in her found itself fanned, bursting into a firestorm of recollection. Ah, now she remembered. Who she was. Her purpose, nay, her very reason for existence, for surviving, thus. Jumbled though her memories might yet be, she still remembered her promise. She could never forget him. After all, she loved him. Flailing, Mina grasped the outstretched arm with all her might, and opened her eyes to a new world. Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did putting this epic what if together. If you're ready for part 3 and beyond, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a single twist in the story. Drop your thoughts, theories, or even wild ideas in the comments. I read every single one. And hey, if you're craving more awesome Naruto content, go check out the other videos on the channel. I've got plenty of heat waiting for you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember, even a shadow clone needs love. Peace out, Shinobi.